Putting it away, obviously.
Sit down. Sit. Oh, but no, I can't see all of you. You said I could. You didn't test it. You didn't test. No, I can't see people at the back. They're hidden completely. You've got to move your chairs around until you see each other. I mean, you seem so squashed. Move forward, please. Move everybody forward. Relax. Bring your chairs out. It's like police station. And then move around till we see each other. You can't breathe there. It's all so squashed. At the back row there. No, the person at the back, I can't see you at all. You're hidden completely next to you. What can we do? Okay, nearly everybody. That's it. Just through the shoulders there, I can see you. Okay. I can't see you at the back. Are you sure the chairs at the back aren't lower? Anyway, whatever. But it's nice to see everybody if I'm talking to you. You know, they're different chairs, you can tell. The people in the front are higher.
Do you want one of these to sit on?
I mean, you don't have to, it doesn't matter if you can't see me, but I like to see you. Take the, why you got cushions on your chairs? Never mind. I mean, be comfortable too. It's a bit better. What to do? I don't know. Doesn't matter what to do. Okay. So you didn't check. You said you did.
I'm taller though.
I know, but you know I'm funny.
Gosh, don't topple off.
Let's see it. Two of them at least. That's it. Perfect. Now, a little bit better. Okay. Still I can't see you at the back. What to do? Okay. I'm sorry, I'll make such a fuss. You may speak now, Jason.
Thank you. I'd just like to welcome Venerable Robina here to my home to speak on why good things happen, which is kind of exciting for us to hear. We're very, very fortunate to have these teachings from Venerable Robina, who is so clear and precise and so practiced through all these years of teaching over and over again. And you'll hear, and you might even find yourself speaking a little bit in this way tomorrow, because
that sounds very fun.
Of clarifying what you're asking and what she's hearing is just, that in itself is profound. So welcome back, Venerable Robina.
Happy to be here, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Jason.
And thank you all for coming, and thank you.
See where we go with all this.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to always start with a little prayer first. It's a little Buddhist prayer, and it's expressing two thoughts. The first part is anyone in the room who already identifies with being a Buddhist. So it's sort of reiterating our reliance on the Buddha, you know, for those of us who figure that. And then the second part can be for all of us. It's expressing, it's kind of stating our purpose. The Buddhists call it setting your motivation, setting your intention, stating your purpose. So we're kind of thinking we're going to sit here together for however long, listen to these ideas. And these ideas are coming from this person called Buddha, who came out of this amazing Indian tradition. These remarkable thinkers and holy beings back then. And it's about the way that life is, what happiness is, what suffering is, blah, 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 whatever, why things happen. We're listening to see if there's some tools we can take from it. It's got to be practical, you know. I mean, I always say, if this were cooking class, if I just sat here raving on about how nice cakes are, you'd be kind of fed up. You'd like at least one recipe, you know. So think of it, listen to it as recipes. That's the way to think, because it's meant to be practical tools. And there might not be any recipes you like, that maybe you don't like even what you hear, and that's perfectly fine. You don't need to. I always also like to say that Buddha's not the boss, we are, you know. So to hear it in this way. So tools for what? Well, to develop what for the Buddha is actually our incredible potential, which we'll talk about. But on the other hand, so that we can be of benefit to others, because we all live in this world together. So thinking like that, you know, expressing this idea. Sangye charam soke chognam la, jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi, tagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penje sangye dropa shok. Sangye charam soke chognam la, jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi, Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sange dropa shok. Sange chadam soke chongnam la, chanchu badu dagni kyap suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sange dropa shok. It was interesting because today I had to do like an interview with somebody at the ABC, and she was talking about, she asked me about why things happen. She said, from the Buddhist point of view, is that a good question to ask? We always seem to be asking the reasons why things happen. Well, I think it's completely logical. I mean, I think it's utterly necessary to ask why things happen, because the implication is if we don't ask why things happen, it would seem there's no logical reason to anything, which I think is a bit of a depressing way to see the world. You know, I mean, whether it's making cakes or something, or growing a tree, we have to ask what the causes are. You know, that seems pretty reasonable. So one way you could approach Buddhism is actually through this eye, why things happen, and that's actually massive in Buddhism. You know, it's huge. There are extraordinarily detailed descriptions of the why the universe is, what is happiness, what is suffering, what is good, what is bad, why. And actually, this is the so-called teachings about karma. You know, this word we know well in the world. It's used such a lot, but I would say even among Buddhists and maybe even among Hindus, it's used in a very colloquial kind of way. You know, a very cliched way. Because actually it's covered in immense depth in the literature. So then I think the crucial question would be, well, that's interesting, because, you know, if we have the Christian teachings about why things happen, and we have the materialist views about why things happen, or why they don't know why things are happening. I mean, you know, lots of things no one knows why, from the materialist point of view. The Muslim point of view, there's these different viewpoints in the world, aren't there? So the Buddhists, I mean, you know, different, very, very, very different explanations for why things happen. So the Buddhist one, it's enormous, it's vast, you know, actually. So then we ought to ask the question, you know, if someone says to you, why is the cake like that? What are the causes of the cake? The first thing you have to ask is, the first thing you have to work out is, where did that information come from? Is the source valid? And that's pretty reasonable, otherwise you're just going to make a mess if you don't know how to make that cake, you know. Can you turn the clock away? You're just making ticking all the time, make people nuts if they're trying to listen to this as well. So it's kind of reasonable, you know. And then let's say you read a book about cakes. Well, you know, it's an important question to ask. Where did this information come from? And I think there's only a few options, aren't there? It's either the person themselves, which is the best one, that's their own experience. They know these recipes, and so they're repeating the recipes. Well, if they're humble, maybe they're telling you their mother's recipes, but they'll at least quote their source. Or they've stolen them from someone else, you know, or they've made them up. I think there's probably no other options, would you think? They're their own experience, which is the best one. There's someone else's recipes, and they're politely saying, I'm just passing them on. They've made them up, or they're stealing them. Can you see my point here? Would you not agree? And that's, I think, if any instructions we get, any information we get about how to get somewhere, how to go to Sydney, how to do this, how to make a cake, you know, we sort of don't say, why does that happen, like some kind of agonising. We ask, well, how do you do it? What are the causes? And then you've got to check on the sources. Hopefully, and then you don't just believe them. You check the source is valid, gives you encouragement, and then you try them yourself. Surely this is how we do things. This is not how we learn things, you know. And when it comes to what we call mathematics and music and cooking and football, it's like that. Very reasonable. So when it comes to things that we think are kind of what we call religious, then I think we lose the plot a bit. I mean, we get pretty cosmic. We tend to think that you can't prove it. We tend to think, you know, you can't prove it. We tend to think, well, I'm allowed to think what I like, because we think it's this vast body of interesting information that anyone can make up. I mean, really, I think we have a very vague notion about it all, and we treat it very mystically. And so then so if we look at say from the Catholic point of view, I was a Catholic, okay? Well, obviously, the view there is very clear, the Christian teachings, the Muslim teachings, they're religious teachings, and they come from a creator. Now, if you were to say, you know, please tell me what God says, and then I go and check what God says to prove that he's okay, I mean, that would be considered the worst sin of pride, wouldn't it? Because the whole idea of a creator, which is what tends to be people's view of religion, is that it's from on high. I'm not criticising. It's okay, you know. And it's not something you can prove, and it's something, if you're really devoted Muslim, really devoted Christian, you would have complete faith. You'd have faith. Nothing wrong, not complaining. But what I'm saying is that's not the Buddhist view. So, and this is a bit of a surprise, because in many ways, you know, Buddhism seems like, on the face of it, like any other religion. I mean, I'm so-called nun. I just sang a prayer, you know. Sounds like religion, doesn't it? So there are many, of course, many similarities in approach, but there are some fundamental differences. And this is often when I'm going to spell it out, it's often surprising to us, you know. So one of the first point I want to make is, you know, if we think of science, like say I were Einstein here, and I'm telling you about about relativity. Well, again, like the cookbook, it would have to be, one, it's coming from my own experience. You know, I'm the person telling you what I found to be so. 2, I'm quoting another source, which is correct of me. 3, I'm lying, I've made it all up. Or 4, I've stolen it and pretending it's my information. I think they're the options. And so so then if I were Einstein and I'm telling you this is my findings from my experience, you know it was not revelation. You know, if I tell you I had a dream about it, you'd chuck me out the door. If you told me that I had a vision, that it was revealed from on high, and then I'd tell you that you should believe me, you'd be shocked. Because the view that we call scientific is reasonable, rational. Maybe you haven't got a clue what relativity means. I mean, it's true. I mean, if you hear it for the first time, it's complete gobbledygook for most of us. But because it's called science, we listen with our intelligent hat on. And we know very well that if I really wanted to take it on board myself, I would take Einstein's methodology, and I would go through it myself, doing one step at a time. And what would I be doing? I'd be experiencing it for myself each step of the way, and I'd be verifying it. And then at some point, if I discover from my own workings, one step at a time, taking all this, and I can prove that Einstein's wrong, he'd be delighted to hear it, and I'll show him the proof. Well, that is the Buddhist approach. Big surprise to us. It's quite shocking. And I think probably most of us who are Buddhists don't have that level of rigour, and which is actually the approach to it. Because Buddha was a regular guy. He was a person who became what they call a Buddha, right? He became one. And that's a pretty shocking concept if I put that into Christian terms, that you sat down and you became God. I mean, they'd lock you up for being completely mentally ill. That is not appropriate. You don't talk like that. You can become oneness with God, whatever words, But to become God, to become a creator and then create universes, they don't talk this way. But the Buddhist view is, the Buddha is this person who became a Buddha. So who is this guy, this nice person? Well, it was interesting. I always quote this lately. It was the Dalai Lama, he mentioned some teaching or a book I read, that actually it was these Indians, these amazing Indians, more than 3,000 years ago, who are the ones who actually began this investigation into the nature of self. Now we, European Christian Jewish thinkers, we go back to the Greeks and the Romans. We haven't got a clue about India, isn't it? We have we don't really appreciate where they're coming from. We just think they're weird and wacko and strange. But I mean, if you analyse what these astonishing thinkers did back then, they're the ones who created this remarkable psychological skill that's known in general these days as mindfulness meditation. Don't misunderstand that word, It's dealing with the mind. So they developed this extraordinary skill that enables a person to, with using intense focus, and it's a highly refined skill that's currently used by anybody, because Buddha took it 500 years later, one of his key techniques, that these amazing Indians cultivated this extraordinary skill that enables you to go beyond, to subdue the grosser level of consciousness, the conceptual and the sensory, and to access subtler levels of our own mind, our own cognitive process, that we don't even posit as existing in our materialist world, because we talk about the brain only, So this is something completely unknown to us. And it's astonishing what they did in that when they're developing this marvelous skill that enables you to go to these subtle levels of your own mind. They actually mapped the mind, and the Hindus and the Indian. There's many variations of it. And then so Buddha came out of this tradition, this astonishing tradition of intense, incredible thinkers, geniuses, using all these techniques, but looking into the meaning of what the self is, and so on and so forth. And then he diverged in his own direction, 500 years later, and since that time, so-called Buddhism. But this fundamental technique is still one of the key techniques that's utterly necessary in the long term for everyone to cultivate if we wish to develop the potential that Buddha says from his own experience that we have the potential to develop, And the Buddhist model of the mind, still with many variations of it since then, are based upon the findings of these extraordinary beings. But this is utterly hidden to us, Even most Buddhists don't think about it this way. And we're so used to thinking of it as spiritual, which means weird and strange, not practical, So then what has Buddha found then? Buddha, if he became a Buddha, what does that mean? Well, first of all, the Tibetan word for Buddha, Sangye, the etymology of it is very tasty. The first syllable, sang, implies the utter eradication from one's mind, because this is the potential of every being, Buddha says, of all neuroses, all ego, all fears, all attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, you name it, all the stuff that we totally take for granted as absolutely normal. So normal that in our culture, you'd be abnormal if you didn't have them. These are utterly normal as far as we're concerned. But the Buddha has found that this stuff is adventitious, which means it's not at the core of our being. This is an astonishing concept. Psychologically speaking, it's absolutely mind-blowing. But the trouble is we read it in nice Buddhist literature, which is sort of, whether it's, forget it, 18th, 17th, 14th, 20th century, 2,000 years ago, we immediately don't hear it properly. We don't hear it as psychology. I mean, psychology, what's that word? It's Greek, We coined it not many years ago. But the Buddha talks about the mind. He doesn't talk about a spirit or a soul, nothing mysterious like that. He talks about the mind. But his view of the mind, like I'm suggesting, is that it has these subtler, far more subtle, more refined levels of existence than we would even posit as existing, like I said, because Buddha he's not describing the brain. So his view of the mind is radically different. But this is coming from this remarkable tradition. So the Buddha himself is, finish the etymology, sorry. The first meaning of the word, the first implication of the word Buddha in Tibetan, sangye, sang, the eradication from one's mind of all neuroses, all fear, all nonsense. I mean, even just to hear these words is bizarre, not to mention to understand the implication, to kind of imagine how you would be if we didn't have these, and we can discuss this. The second syllable, ge, implies the development to perfection, literally, of all the other stuff, which the Buddha would say is at the core of our being, indestructibly so. Love, compassion, all this business. And I mean, this is dealt with in vast depth in the literature. They sound like cute words to say. Well, the Buddhist view, the Buddhist study of the mind, Buddhist psychology, when it's studied in depth, which again most Buddhists wouldn't do, it's astonishing. I mean, I think Western science will be blown out. It's utterly fascinating. And what they're describing is not the brain. They're describing nothing physical. They're describing the detailed, intricate description. There's the intricate, detailed descriptions of the actual cognitive process of the mental consciousness at the grosser level, the conceptual, and at the subtler level, as well as the sensory and how these work. It's extremely interesting and totally fascinating, and initially quite complex. Needs enormous kind of thinking. And where's this coming from? These amazing Indians who map the mind internally, not with a microscope of a mind to look at, not the microscope to look at the brain, but the microscope of their own mind. So it's an astonishing, and the Buddhist one is this astonishing capacity for inner awareness, not in any cosmic vague way. And we really don't know much about, we just don't seem to go there in our minds. The best we can think in the West is to be mindful. To calm down and make your mind peaceful, which is fantastic. But that's just touching the tip of the iceberg of what Buddha says we can accomplish with this marvellous, marvellous mind of ours, So the fundamental point, I mean, don't hold your breath as for actually achieving it. It takes a while. But even to have it as a possibility is pretty astonishing. That the Buddha's finding, his fundamental finding, one of his crucial findings, from his own experience, in his own mind, is that the neuroses, the delusions, the stuff that we think is so normal, do not belong, and we can rid our minds of them utterly. So even forget the ridding their mind utterly of them, just to learn to lessen them, that sounds pretty amazing for us, Because when we think of anger, depression, low self-esteem, jealousy, anxiety, this stuff is completely normal. We never think twice about it. And even the way we talk these days, because we have all these new terms in Western psychology, they just sound like cute human experiences. But this is the stuff of Buddhist psychology, and it's dealt with, like I said, in enormous depth. This is the heart of being a Buddhist, actually. So this is what Buddha's saying. He has found that all minds, all consciousnesses, and these words are used virtually synonymously, have this natural potential. Whether you're Hitler, a rat, a kangaroo, or a human. The term in Tibetan is very interesting for the term that we often translate into English, sentient being. The Tibetan word is wonderful. I think it's very tasty. The term in Tibetan is sem-chen, and it's translated literally as mind possessor. So Buddha's deal is there are trillions of mind possessors. Humans are a tiny percentage. First point about the mind. Second point about the mind. is that it's not physical. This is fundamental. And in order to understand Buddhism, you've got to take this as your working hypothesis. It's not obviously initially easy to prove it, clearly. But you've got to start somewhere. It's not easy to prove acupuncture either. You've got to start with the hypothesis there are such things called meridians. Who's ever heard of a meridian, you know? If you've been allopathic medicine all your life, it's the weirdest idea you've ever heard. But you can't, unless you open your mind to the possibility of another whole way of describing health, you can't begin to go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. So we've got to take the hypothesis that your consciousness is not physical. It's initially quite, it crashes into all the views we have that we've taken for granted as the truth when we think of the brain. It's not necessarily contradicting anything, it's just a very different way of seeing it. So the first point about the mind is it's not your brain. Doesn't mean the brain doesn't play an intimate role, no question. The mind is not the brain. Words used synonymously with the word consciousness. As I'm already indicating, the grosser level, the conceptual and the sensory, which is all we posit in our culture, or begin to comprehend, is the tip of the iceberg of this mind of ours. We've got these far subtler levels, as I said. So if you were to see a person who'd accomplished this technique, which is called single-pointed concentration, the one that mindfulness uses, invented by these amazing Indians 3,000 years ago, if a person had accomplished this single-pointed concentration, they would look like they were dead, which of course is why I think it's so mystical. Because in our models, we don't posit anything that isn't physical. And if we do, it's just weird and mysterious, The third thing about the mind, the consciousness, our mind, our consciousness, is that it refers to thoughts, feelings, intellect, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being. This is our mind. The way Buddhism uses it, it's a very subjective word. Not sort of like a pot of things up here, but it's mental, your daily subjective mental experiences. And then we only access the tip of the iceberg, which is why we must, in the long term, to accomplish what Buddha says we can, these subtle levels of our mind, using these techniques, this concentration technique. The next thing about the mind, which is, again, radically different from the way we think in the West, and indeed from other religious teachings, is there's not one atom of our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our anger, our love, our compassion, you name it. Not our being good at football or music, you name it. Not one atom of this is the handiwork of anyone else. This is a major point for Buddhism. You've got two options in the world. Your mother and daddy created you, or a creator created you. Isn't it? Pretty much. Well, the Buddha's got a third option. He says, guess what? As Dalai Lama calls it, we created ourselves, which sounds a bit hilarious. And this is the business of karma, the law of karma, which we're going to get into. Because this is the explanation of why things happen. It's Buddha's explanation, coming from his own direct experience. Not revisions, not revelation, not speculating. Hasn't made it up, let's hope. Got to find out. Might have. It's up to us to find out. So you're not the handiwork of anyone else. This is massive. This is actually massive point. And in terms of one's daily practice as a Buddhist, taking this on board, the experiential implications of this are huge across the board in your daily life. Because if we look at the materialist view, which we take as a truth, we don't question. We assume it's true. We assume it's science, which means true. But look at all the assumptions there. Look at the feeling. Look at how we feel every day, especially when things go wrong. It's not my fault. I didn't ask to get born. We say this is like a joke, but it's totally how we feel. So the implication is it's not my responsibility. It's not my fault. And if we analyse our ego, the way when things go wrong especially, completely it rises like a sleeping lion, this innocent victim to whom things happen unfairly. This is one of the reasons, I think, in our culture, the materialist world, why we suffer so stupendously. Because we don't seem to know why things happen. So, what happened?
They're just going to prepare for you.
Oh, okay, good, yeah. So, the next thing about the mind then, if it's true, I'm not the handiwork of mummy or daddy, and secondly, my mind is not my brain. My mummy and daddy gave me a body. They're very kind, That's no problem. But they did not give me my tendencies, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, This is massive. And this takes time to think through, because we're so assumed we're the product of parents, So assume it deeply, deeply in our bones as an absolute truth. And all our psychology models, neuroscience, everything is based upon this assumption. So it's quite shocking almost to hear this one. The next point about the mind. So, okay, it's not physical. It goes to far more subtle levels, way beyond the conceptual and the sensory, which we need and can, in the long term, learn to access. It's not the handiwork of a creator and not the handiwork of our parents. So the obvious question is, well, where do I come from? Where does my mind start? Where do I start, you know? Because if you're a materialist, you start in your mummy's womb. At some point, we're not sure. Which is why we didn't ask to get born. I have no memory of my mother asking me if she could please make me. No. She did not refer to me, you know? We know that. So if you're a Christian, you know very well your source is God. You know that. Or Muslim. Clear. Okay, Buddha, what does he say? Well, he has found, from his own experience, you have to take this as your view here, take this as our assumption, that our consciousness, our mind, think of it really, the best way to say it is like a river of mental moments. The term they use, one of the terms they use in Buddhist psychology is the mental continuum. All the river of mental moments, all of my thoughts and meanings of feelings of today, coming from the thoughts and feelings of yesterday, in an unbroken chain of mental moments. And we know very well if we keep tracking it back, we're going to get back to the first second of conception in mummy's womb. And this is getting us into the understanding of this concept that Buddha is massively into, which is the view of karma, the so-called law of cause and effect. We mightn't use those words in our culture, but if we understand science, it's the law of cause and effect, you know. Once you establish you need that seed, a bit of water, a bit of soil, a bit of time, a bit of sun, you'll get a flower. Once you do it once or twice, you've got the law down, and it's coherent, it's consistent, it applies every time. It's called cause and effect. Cause and effect. Well, his view of cause and effect, they refer to as the law of karma. He's referring to, and where this law, as far as Buddha is concerned, where this law plays out is in the minds and lives of mind possessors, sentient beings. So in other words, the law of karma is Buddha's explanation of why things happen. Why bad, why good, why this, why Hitler, why anything. It's an elaborate, and as I said, deeply dealt with in vast and in great depth, and you know, in the Buddhist literature. So if Buddha's not a creator, we have to then ask, where did the information come from? It's really crucial to ask this. But we so take it for granted if it's spiritual, it comes from on high. We assume that. It's naive, it's bizarre. Got to think it through, join the dots. If he's not a creator, and that he doesn't posit a creator, then we're gobsmacked. Where does this information come from? Well, either he's made it up, as I said before, or it's his own observation, or he's stolen it from someone else, or he's quoting someone else. But from the Buddhist point of view, and the Buddha, this is Buddha's experience. And anybody since that time who's become a Buddha, who are the practitioners of being Buddhist, you know. So, I mean, it's a bit shocking to us to think, because the first question is, well, how can you prove reincarnation? How can we prove blah, blah, blah? Because we assume it can't be. Because our view of the mind doesn't include subtler levels. So we've got to look at our assumptions. All I'm saying is, if we're interested in the Buddhist view, we have to really unpack our assumptions, look carefully at all the assumptions that are packed so tightly in our minds that we never question, you know. So, of course, the only way to enter into this, like learning anything from the first moment, is you've got to take it as your working hypothesis. And I say that sincerely in my approach to being a Buddhist. I never say the words, I believe in karma, I believe in reincarnation, I believe in Buddhism. I never say, in the same way you would never say, I believe in mathematics. You don't, do you? Why? Because you know that mathematics is something that can be proved and used as a tool. Well, guess what? Same here. Same here. And the point is, as the Dalai Lama pointed out, just like with Einstein's saying, this is what I found to be true, you know? He says, here's my findings, here's my methodology, over to you, baby. And you know perfectly well, you just don't walk away and believe in relativity, you don't believe in mathematics, you take the information, and if you want to internalize it yourself, you go through the process. It's what we call learning. Nothing cosmic about it. Well, that's what technically being a Buddhist is. One chooses to take on board Buddha's findings as one's hypothesis, so you start where you can, which is at the beginning. And each step of the way, you surely would be experiencing it for yourself and verifying it. It has to be this way. What else is it? And that, as the Dalai Lama said, if you actually are doing this seriously, and you get to a point where you, each step, it's incremental, and you then can prove that Buddha's wrong, then you must reject him. So I think that level of discipline and clarity, most of us don't. We in a way, we're kind of more intellectually lazy. We'd rather merely believe Buddha, It's okay, nothing wrong, I'm just talking. Okay, so let's assume this information that I'm telling you in this room, coming from the Buddha's teachings, is from the Buddha, or Buddhas. People become Buddhas, All I can say is my working hypothesis. So, your consciousness or your mind is not from mummy or daddy. Not from a creator. Not your brain. Goes to far more subtle levels. Goes back and back and back. Its source is previous moments of this river of mental moments, which as a concept isn't that complicated if we can posit the possibility that it's not physical and that it goes to subtler levels. So clearly the level at the time of conception of consciousness is more subtle than it is when you're growing up and it's highly conceptual, clearly. But, if we take this view of subtler levels of our consciousness, this river of mental moments, we get back to the first second of conception. Well, the second before conception, egg was in mummy's body, sperm was in daddy's body, whatever, but consciousness is its own continuity. And the Buddha's view would be not more than a few weeks before that, it was in another body, and so on and so forth. As a concept, not complicated, just it's quite different from how we think, And as, so this is the key point now, getting to the point why good things happen, why anything happens. The Buddha's deal is, Dalai Lama calls it like self-creation. He mentioned that one time. It's not a bad concept. Because what Buddha's saying essentially is this. Every millisecond of what any one of us experiences, moment by moment, is necessarily, mainly, the fruit of past programming. I think Buddha would have liked that term, in our mind in the past. So in the same way that if you sit today and play the piano, it's logical to anyone watching, because we understand how we learn things, that that's the product of your past programming at music. The extent to which you've programmed yourself with music is the extent to which you can play today. It's fairly obvious. The extent to which we know anything today is the product of what we did yesterday, day before, which is your mind. So the Buddha's view is that, but you just extend the mind to before this body, that's all. Which as a concept, as I said, isn't complicated. It's an easy concept. It's just that because it's so different from how we tend to think, So Buddha's idea is that every millisecond what we think and do and say, and they use the analogy of seeds and fruits, is the fruit of past seeds we've planted. Because every millisecond of what we think and do and say sows seeds in the mind. There's not 1 millisecond of anything any sentient being, ants, dogs, kangaroos or humans, thinks or does or says or sees that doesn't leave seeds in the mind. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say is this intricate process of programming. There's no thought that goes astray, no thought that doesn't stay in the mind and then coming together with various conditions produce future thoughts, future tendencies and future experiences. I mean, this is just a simple principle, It's actually described in great detail, the mechanics of it, how it works. But this is Buddha's view, it's Buddha's finding. So that's why he doesn't posit a creator. He's not being rude. He just says we don't need creating, because we create ourselves. We are the product. In the same way that my music today is the product of my hard work. My being good at football is the product of my hard work. Or my being angry is the product of my past hard work, of being angry. Or jealous, or loving, or kind. Or good at football, or good at music, whatever. So in other words, Buddha would say, we come fully programmed from the first second of conception with these trillions of these tendencies. Because there's nothing that goes on that doesn't stay in the mind, doesn't stay there. Nothing that goes, that we think and do and say that disappears. It's all there, accessible to us. And then it has this, it's so different from how we think. And it leaves, and it grows, this energy grows and cultivates and then manifests as future experiences, including our lives, the kind of body we have, the type of life we have, how we're seen by others, how we're treated, even the way the environment functions. It's kind of highly intricate, extraordinary process, But this is Buddha's findings, this is the Buddha's teachings. So before going into detail here, the implication of this, the experiential implication, is pretty tasty. And this is the one that really, for any person seriously trying to practice Buddhism, that has the radical effect on your life. Because if we look into our lives, I think the only time we ask questions, why did that happen, is when it's a bad thing. You know, isn't it? I don't think I've ever. That's why Jason purposely did it. Put the thing, why do good things happen? I always say, all these years I've been a Buddhist, you know, working with it myself, listening to other people, in classes, you know, we all have the question. Everybody has the question. Why do bad things happen? We always ask the questions, well, you mean to say that little child who got an abusive mother, they did something bad in the past? And I have to say it, and I mean it sincerely. I've never yet had a person ever ask the question, you mean, Robina, that child was a good mummy and a good daddy and there's money in the bank and good health and loving families, you mean they deserve it? Can you hear my point? We don't ask that because we take the good for granted, which implies that we deserve good, but which implies we do not deserve bad. Is this not how we feel? Would you think that's how we feel, isn't it? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? So I think the source of so much of our pain and suffering in life is when bad things do happen and we can't see in the ordinary way a cause for it, you know, which is why we have so much anguish, so much suffering, so much suffering. I mean, if I punch you in the nose and you punch me right back, we can tend to say, okay, if I'm brave enough, I'll accept responsibility. I just punched you. What to do, you know? There's the cause. Simplest level of cause and effect. But we can see in the world so much unbelievable suffering happens to seemingly innocent victims, which is why we have so much rage and anguish. And because we're pulling our hair out, because the first question we always ask, I think it's so marvellous, it tells so much. We ask the question why. It's fascinating, because we do want logic, we do want causes, we want to know why things happen. Otherwise we wouldn't even ask, you know, if you don't ask why it happens, someone comes along in the street and just punches you in the nose and you keep walking, you wouldn't just shrug your shoulders. Most people would be freaking out mostly about why did that happen. Is it not true? But we do never ask the question, why do good things happen? I think this is really quite profound. So in other words, what are the assumptions there? Well, the assumption has to be that I deserve good things. It has to be this. Why are we so shocked when our parents do bad things? Some people never get over the fact that their parents were mean. And I mean, some parents are really mean, because parents are humans. Join the club here. There are some maniacs who have babies, you know. It's very true. But look how some people, even if the parent wasn't that bad, we're full of this torment all our lives. Can't get over the fact that we had a neurotic mother. I mean, we take it so personally. Would you not agree it's interesting? But we tend to think that's normal, don't we? You spend your life with your therapist, going back into the past, looking for some needles in haystacks for the cause of why this kind of thing happened, you know. It's very fascinating. So Buddha indeed would say they're causes, but he's got a very different view of the causes, I tell you. We'll spell it out a bit. But I think it is utterly surprising, amazing we don't ask why do good things happen. I've never, ever, no one's ever shocked when a good thing happens. Ever. Is it not true? We just greedily take more. Because why? The assumption has to be we deserve it. Now listen to this. If you looked in your bank account and you saw $0 and you know you've not worked and earned any money, you would not say, how dare there be no money in my bank? You wouldn't say that because you know you don't deserve it. I mean, it sounds a bit heavy, but if you didn't work, you didn't earn money, then there are $0 in your bank, right? So you'd know that you would never say, how dare there be no money in my bank? You wouldn't, would you? You don't say, I deserve money. You only deserve money if you earn it. We know that. And if you don't earn it, then you don't deserve it. The word's heavy, deserve, but we use it. So you know if you create if you look in your garden and it's full of weeds, you don't have a mental breakdown and try to go sue somebody like the gardeners in the shop, but it's your garden. You don't deserve, like, where are the flowers? You know, because you didn't grow. I mean, we get this logic. When it comes to money and things, you know, you've got to deserve it, but you've got to go out there, get it, and do it. Then you look at the garden and you delight, because you know you deserve this beautiful garden. You would never take your garden for granted. Do you understand? And because you know you grew the veggies, you wouldn't want to waste one veggie. As soon as you eat one veggie, you want to plant another seed, so even more veggies later. We get the logic of gardens, which I think it's a great concept, a great analogy they use in Buddhism. So if you think of your life like this, which is quite shocking, we don't. That whatever you meet in your life, whoever you meet, whatever occurs in your mind, whatever happens to you, your life is your garden, Buddha says, and you made the garden, baby. I mean, the concept isn't complicated. It's just that as soon as it's bad things, we become completely overwhelmed with grief and guilt and want to kill ourselves. You mean I'm a bad person? Well, no, you're not. But you didn't do some good. You didn't do the weeding, baby. So that the implication alone for this, for me, is so profound. Is that it demands that we take responsibility, we be accountable. It's like it demands we grow up. But I think it's really powerful to take responsibility for the good things. The irony of ego in Buddhism is we're addicted to negativity. We run like a magnet to negativity. Look at our minds all the time, chatting away, always finding fault in ourselves, forgetting about other people, always criticising. You know, it's true, 27 people can say you're a nice person. You don't believe it. You're hungry to hear it again, but we don't believe it. One person criticises. We believe it instantly as the truth. Is this not interesting? Is this not kind of profound? What does this say about us, you know? And this is the terrible irony of the way the Buddha would talk about how so-called ego works. You know? That we run like a magnet to negativity, which is why we always ask the questions, why do bad things happen? I mean, it's common in every country I ever go, wherever I go. Myself the same, our minds are the same. We have the same questions. It's shocking to us. And often, initially with karma, it is shocking for us to hear that terrible thing happens. People suffer because of their own past negative actions. You know, racism, sexism, brutality, terrorism, I'm using extreme examples, you know, rape, children being murdered. It's too shocking to our mind, you know. But we never, ever, it's not shocking that another child can never be raped and have lovely parents and lovely things and good things and money in the bank and only goodness happen. It's kind of fascinating. At that level, it's fascinating, you've got to admit. I remember this occurred one time when I was teaching in our monastery in Kathmandu, and we're discussing karma. And one woman was in a wheelchair, and she was in tears. She said, "You mean I deserve this?" So I thought, you know, about how to answer her. And I said, yes, you deserve, you know, all the goodness in your life, your friends, your beloveds, the health, your kindness, your morality, your goodness, the money in the bank, your support, your good family. Yes, you deserve it. And she heard. She got the point. We never think this way. It's fascinating. I mean, it's utterly fascinating. So it takes time to even posit this as a possibility. But on the face of it, it's not possible to work it out. You've got to go a bit deeper to understand at least the mechanics a little bit of how it works. Otherwise, it kind of seems like utter cruelty. We can't put it together. We can't conceptualize it, you know. So like I said, what time do we have to stop?
7.
Who? What time?
7.
Oh, okay. Well, we can be flexible.
Yes. Yeah.
10
Okay.
minutes.
Okay. So anyway, before I go further, let's ask some questions. Would you have some questions from this? Because I've said an awful lot already. So, yes, sweetheart. Do you have a microphone? No. It's okay. No worries. You're good. Talk. Yes.
I was interested, Robina, in your comment about a lot of Buddhists don't have the rigour.
Yes.
What do you mean by the rigour? Because
Yes.
people come here to hear,
Yes.
and they go to many places
Yes.
to hear what
Yes.
the Buddhist teachings.
Yes.
So there's something else that's underpinned by what you're saying.
Okay. What I'm meaning is, I suppose because most of us have ordinary lives, we have husbands and babies and mortgages and children and jobs, you know, isn't it? And so then. And we might come to a teaching every now and again, because clearly it's not. So whereas, you know, let's say you decide to become a nun and you go to, you know, you'd go to one of the monasteries and you'd learn Tibetan and you'd be like this German geshe. You know, you heard of the first female geshe. Have you heard, you know, about geshes? The Tibetan, they study in the Tibetan monastic university system for 10, 20, 30 years, and then you graduate as what they call a geshe. And that's a person who's been doing what I'm saying in a serious way, going into depth, studying all the stuff, learning all, you know, memorizing everything, learning all the extensive literature on the mind, studying in enormous depth. 20, 30 years of intense study. In that sense, that rigor, that discipline is what I'm saying. So that so this German woman, she's studied for 17 years at the monastery in Tibet, in Dharamsala, and she became one of these geshis. So what I'm getting at is most of us don't go to that level. That's all I'm saying. Studying all this extensive literature about karma, the law of karma, the way the universe is, what the mind is, and all this stuff. Extensive, vast, and deep learning. That's what I meant. But I suppose I also even mean even for those of us who are, who are interested in the Buddhist teachings and want to apply it in some degree to our lives. I would also say that what I'm meaning by using rigor and discipline in our practice is applying to a particular approach to working on our mind, which I'll go into, which I'll talk about. Yeah. So someone else have any points? Any questions? Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned that we don't ask why good things happen in the same way that we ask why bad things happen.
Yeah.
But why do you think it is that we are reluctant to trust the good things and we look for the negative when something good happens?
So give me an example, meaning trust.
So why is it that when something good happens we tend to think, oh, well, this can't be right, or it's too good to be true, or...
Oh, I see, yeah. Whereas bad kind of feels, here we go again, natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I suppose, all of that really, I think, okay, now I think we do need to talk about the mind, and we'll start it a little bit, and then we'll have our dinner, and then we'll go on about the mind. Because in Buddhism, I'd say there are two. There's many areas. Like if you're doing this intensive study, like these people in the monasteries, and it's available to Westerners too, in whatever degree. There's two vast areas. One is this whole law of karma and how it works, and then the other is this vast area is Buddhist psychology, which is extraordinarily deep and sophisticated, the way these states of mind work, so, which I want to mention. So this is bringing us to the mind, to understand the way our mind works. So I said loosely before, roughly, it seems, the irony of ego is we're addicted to negativity, and this is a profound truth, so I want to try and unpack that in a bit more detail, so we'll start now. So basically the Buddhist model of the mind is deceptively simple, seems deceptively simple. We've got the sensory consciousness, which is, and we'll go into this in more detail. And then we have the mental consciousness. So sensory consciousness is that part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions, obviously, through the medium of the eyeball, the ear, the business, the body, the physical. And again, they describe this in great detail. But already what's really fascinating about this is that, I use the example, if I were to say to you, wow, what a pretty cup, I'd look at that and I might say, what a pretty cup. So we could all be forgiven for assuming that my eyes are seeing a pretty cup. We all agree, don't we? Anything that's an object of the eyes, we call it art, we call it beautiful design. It's obviously an object of our eye consciousness, isn't it? It's just natural, it makes sense. But strictly speaking, this is very, very telling. Buddha's view of the senses is that the eye consciousness is that the sensory consciousnesses, the five, actually are like dumb animals. They're profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. So all they cognize, in the case of the eye consciousness, all it can cognize is two things, shape and colour. So then we've got to ask the question, where does what a pretty cup come from, if it's not an object of my eye consciousness? You understand? So that's the mental consciousness. So this is, as Lama Zopa puts it, and they point here for the mental consciousness, for the mind, Mental consciousness is where the workshop is where all their thoughts and feelings and emotions, everything we've ever thought and said and done, and Buddha would say, going back to beginningless time, as insane as that sounds, nothing goes astray. Everything is stored there. That's how come we can have memory, and we're not talking the brain here. That's how come the mind can go to subtler levels. Everything we think and do and say and observe and hear and taste and touch and smell stays stored in the consciousness. So, the mental consciousness is massive. It's like this massive computer. Really, where everything is stored. And that means even in this life, I build up my thoughts of what I think is pretty, what is this, what is that it's a cup, that it's this, that it's that. All this conceptual information, this series of viewpoints in my mental consciousness. So basically, a pretty cup is a conceptual story that my thoughts have created. Can you hear that? My eye consciousness does not have that capacity. So this already alone is very powerful, because it's telling us this is where, as Lama Zopa puts it, this is where the workshop is. And this is what we have to learn to unpack and unravel using these skills and using the Buddhist psychology to be able to then start to distinguish between From the Buddhist point of view, in the mental consciousness, there are 3 categories of states of mind. And we have to start to unpack and unravel. And we're discussing here the conceptual stories in the mind. Okay, there's trillions and in many levels. So they're divided into 3 categories. There's no 4th category. There are those that are neurotic, delusional, negative, deceptive, disturbing. There's a term in Buddhist psychology, afflicted. All these terms are referring to these neuroses in us that we, like I said before, take for granted. And they're called attachment, anger, pride, jealousy. Simple, cute words, you know. You understand? They're the neuroses, and they're in this one category. There's another category, and they're called the positive or virtuous states of mind. Love, compassion, blah, blah. We know these words backwards, you know, but we don't, especially in Western psychology, we just think these are kind of cute. We have all these serious terminology, like bipolar and this and IDAD and blah, 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 all these new things every day. You understand my point? But the Buddha's view hasn't changed. The Buddha's view of the mind, which is, again, dealt with in vast depth, these states of mind, this is still the stuff of the Buddhist psychology. So the 3rd category is really interesting. These are all, I like to call the 3rd category, the mechanics of our mind. Concentration, memory. They're neither good nor bad in their nature. The ability to remember what you're doing from moment to moment, which is the meaning of mindfulness, actually, technically. It's one part of the mind. There's the ability of the mind to, it's highly technical, all these parts of us, all working away. And these are what are cultivated and developed to an incredible degree of clarity in this concentration meditation technique, where we can learn to have incredible focus, incredible precision, and where we can learn to access subtle levels of mind, where we can access our memory, we can see the past, we can see the future, we can see the minds of others, because this subtle level of mind has the capacity to cognize phenomena the gross level can't. So all the mechanical parts, they call them neutral states of mind, insofar as they're not virtuous like love or neurotic like anger. So there's 3 clear, distinctive characteristics. And there's no 4th category. All the states of mind come under these 3. So in Buddhist psychology, they're dealt with, the major ones are dealt with. There's a text where you study 51 of these different mental states of mind. But there's thousands of them, variations of them, and highly complex. And as we know, there are thousands of, from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, we know that these are never stopping, isn't it? There's this quiet noise underneath all day. Wouldn't you agree? And we're acting out just a few of them. And we're noticing just a few when they get loud enough. Like you notice you're angry when your heart's shaking. You notice you're depressed when you can't get out of bed one morning. But we don't notice most of the time. We're on default. We're on autopilot. So we are grotesquely, in Buddhist view, unaware of what the name of God is going on between these ears of ours, you know. In fact, it sounds a bit depressing and shocking, but I remember Lama Zopa saying that if we think about it, the vast majority of all humans on this earth, have no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives at all, because we're so obsessed with the outside. You think from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, the object of our mind is the external. We'd be in trouble if we didn't work out what's going on in the car, or this, the breakfast, the person. We're obsessed with the objects of the senses, and all of our conceptuality is dealing with the external world much of the time, which is our jobs, you know. So we're not really paying attention until it gets so bad we're forced to, and then we've got to take a pill or see a therapist. Do you understand? Because we don't deal with it before then. That's our trouble. So, okay, there's that. Now, the negative states of mind, like I said before, that we think are totally normal, this is Buddha's shocking finding that we can get rid of them. And that's the job of being a Buddhist. Is using this skill, using this model, doing the unpacking and unraveling of these conceptual states of mind to an incredibly sophisticated degree, where we literally can see how they're not logical, they're not reasonable, they're nonsense, they're made up stories, which sounds so weird to us. And all of them, in their nature, are neurotic, are fear-based, and they're the so-called ego. They are the components of so-called ego. And their nature is neurotic. Their nature is negative. They run to the dark side every time. Whatever word you want. That's their nature. So you can see the more miserable a person is, the more depressed, the more angry, the more jealous, the more everything is so-called negative. Positivity doesn't even exist in that person's life. They can't even see anything good and can't hear anything good. It's the nature of these neuroses. Can we see that in our own lives? When we're really angry, really jealous, really depressed, life is a nightmare. It's full on like a nightmare. No wonder we go mad with this stuff. You can't see or hear anything remotely good or virtuous. Not possible. Is that not our experience? So we want to ask the question, why? Well, that's the nature of these neuroses. It's their nature. The Buddha's view is, people often ask, where's fear in Buddhist psychology? Well, what's astonishing, it's not given its own status, because in all these states of mind, and there's like a hierarchy of them, which we're going to go more into detail, rooted in a really sublime, subtle level of these neuroses. They refer to it as ego grasping. So subtle, we don't have a name for it in our psychology. There's like a hierarchy of these neuroses, and their nature is fear. Their nature is fear and anxiety and panic and drama. That's their nature. That's how they are. Their job is to be negative. That's their job. Do you understand? And that because they always distort. And they're based in unreality, Buddha says, which seems a bit complex to us. I'll go into it. Whereas the virtuous states of mind, from the Buddha's view, are relatively in sync with reality. Because the negative ones are totally panic-stricken, I-based. Neurotic, deluded, panic-stricken, bereft, lonely, me, I-based. And the virtuous ones are necessarily other-based and interdependent and reasonable and harmonious. They've got this character. And the more we can see this in our own mind, the more it makes sense, you know. We'll go into this more.
Excuse me, Robina.
Yeah,
The
time to go.
meal's ready?
The
Yeah.
dinner's ready. Okay, so please enjoy dinner and have a gossip. Have a gossip about all this stuff. Chat about this stuff. And we'll see you soon. Okay. Hello, darling. Did you have enough dinner? It was quick, wasn't it?
This is delicious.
Oh, it was delicious, wasn't it?
Oh, so nice.
I know. Amazing. So any questions while you're eating your dinner? Any questions popped up? Are we on here? We're not on.
Yes.
Oh, we are?
Yeah, it goes out there for people who are outside.
Okay, good. So do we have any questions? No? So I better just keep talking, shall I? Okay. So then, Buddha's deal is, we've got this mind, which has this astonishing capacity to be rid of the rubbish and full of the goodness. I mean, speaking very simply, which sounds simple, but actually if you hear some of the qualities of a person who'd accomplished that, it's kind of mind-boggling. So let's look then at the mind. I mean, karma is one thing, and I have hardly begun to talk about it, and we'll go into it, because the fact is the way we use karma is kind of curious, you know. It's sort of like, it's almost like a big stick that's used, it's always referred to the bad stuff, and it's sort of like, it's like an alternative to God punishing you. A little bit, the way we tend to hear it, you know, a very cliche kind of way. But what it's referring to is what for the Buddha is a natural law. So if you think of botany or gravity, you think, you know, if you're a scientist, you know it's a natural law. I mean, even numbers. What are numbers? Some clever Arab fellow, isn't it, who went from that ridiculous Roman lot who had V's and I's and X's, and he made up this thing of little 0 to 9. I mean, look at the universe since then. It's phenomenal. The thing is, think about it. That's what natural law means. But, you know, we with our intelligent minds have observed things that grow. We've labelled it botany, and we've articulated this extraordinarily sophisticated system. But we didn't create it. Can you see? Is that what we mean by natural law, isn't it? Do you agree with that? Well, that's how Buddha's talking about karma, which is kind of shocking to us because we think it's religion and it's made up by a superior being. Therefore, is mysterious and mystical. Not like that. Buddha has observed with his own mind. Indeed, we're talking about a level of mind here that we don't posit as existing. That's the point, a subtler level of cognition. That has observed this is the way the universe works. And actually, the way it actually works, I mean, the mechanics of it are incredibly sophisticated. When you learn about it initially, it's like learning the fundamentals of botany. You put a seed in the ground, bit of sun, bit of soil, bit of water, and you get a flower. But you know you can learn it to the most sophisticated degree. Well, karma's like that too. It's a natural law. He's not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. Therefore, the Buddhist view, there's no concept of punishment and reward. And if we think about ego and think about good and bad, that's how we hear it. As soon as we hear, oh, you know, you shouldn't do that, we think of it as somebody imposing something upon you, and you'll get punished if you're naughty. Now, this is a very interesting point, actually. You know, Buddha, like Jesus, like Islam, like good communists, like your grandma, has a view of morality. Behave nicely, please. Any decent halfway human being would agree with that, you know. But the reasons are fundamentally different. When I was a Catholic, and I always quote this, and I remember I have a Jesuit priest friend, we talk about these things. He joked and said, I think I'll be born a Tibetan Buddhist next life, Robina. Anyway, he really likes all the ideas, you know. So anyway, we were talking, and I asked him, what is a sin by definition? What defines something as a sin? He said, by definition, a sin is doing what God said not to do. That makes complete sense, because God's the creator. Of course he's the boss, you know. So therefore is to be obeyed. Therefore God has the power, that's his parameter, his power, to punish and reward. And that's the concept we accept when it comes to good and bad, isn't it? That's how we think about it. Well, look, you don't have to be a Christian or a Muslim to have that view. In my mother's household, my mother said to me, don't do that. And I, of course, being a smarty pants, would say, why not? And we know her answer. Because I say so. We just take this for granted. But this is actually a philosophical position, and Buddha disagrees with this. We assume, you know, this good girl, bad girl mode. So when Mummy says don't do it, and then she doesn't see me do it, we go, oh, great, I got away with it. Do we not think this way? And you look at how we are in daily life. We might not be Christian or Muslim, but we want to be seen to be good girls, and we do not want to be seen to be naughty girls. It's very instinctive. This is a function of ego. Well, Buddha disagrees fundamentally with that model. He says it's just dualistic. He says morality is a natural law. Just do some market research in this room, please. Do you like being killed, lied to, stolen from? We know the answer. You can observe dogs and mice are the same. You look at their body language. It's completely instinctive. So the Buddha's view is that immorality is an action that harms another. Hardly rocket science. At the most basic level, you know. So at the most basic level of Buddhist teachings, he exhorts us, like Jesus, like your grandma, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't behave nicely, please. But the reason is fundamentally different. It's not because he says so. He's like a doctor. A doctor will say to you, don't smoke. And you say, why not? And the doctor won't say, excuse me, because I say so. No, and she's not a punisher or rewarder. She's a kind person who will advise you, and she will say, well, because it'll harm you, Robina. So we all know that, and we're so grateful. We're not going to be rude to us. Who do you think you are? You're going to punish me with cancer. How dare you, you know? I can do what I like. We don't talk this way. So you don't go home and then think, oh, look, good doctor's not here. Get your Marlboros out and start smoking. You understand? We understand there's this distinction. A natural law is smoking, but we don't think of a morality as a natural law. Is this not interesting? In Buddha's view, it's exactly the same, and Buddha's like a doctor. So he's observed, he says, a negative action, initially, grosser level, is one that harms another, but the reason in the beginning he exhorts us not to do it, and this is where it's very surprising. And this is what we have to really get into touch with. He says, guess what, Robina? If you kill and lie and steal, guess whom you harm first? Yourself. This is his point about karma. So what he's saying is, just naturally, he didn't make it up. It's not revelation. He's not speculating. He has observed. And I mean, to go into it in more detail, we can talk about it a little bit. It's quite subtle. That whatever action, and that's the meaning of the word karma, but what it's really referring to most subtly is mental action, the thought, the intention. The real meaning of karma is referring to the thought, the intention. I will kill the mouse. I will walk out the door. I will give $50 to the poor person. It's the first step. There's a saying in Tibetan, Lama Zopa translates it, as everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought. But the trouble is, the Buddha would say, we come programmed into this life, completely programmed, virtually to the point of instinct, with much of what we think and do and say. We don't question it. That's why we instinctively want to eat food and have sex and do this and go here and go there and get angry and get upset or play piano. Look at Mozart. His mummy gives him a piano, off he goes, you know. I remember reading recently about a 7-year-old American girl who's been writing sonatas in her head since she's 3. Now she conducts orchestras and plays the violin and the piano and writes orchestral pieces, and she's 7. Excuse me, that didn't come out of the sky. The Buddha would say she must have done something like this before. Brought it with her. Tendencies. So whatever, Buddha's saying, whatever we do, every millisecond with our thoughts, and then which are acted out by the servants of our mind, which is our body and speech. Let's face it. If you see a fist go like that, you don't assume the person's thinking, I love you very much. If you see a person take $50, you assume there's something going on in the mind. I mean, it's sort of, we tend not to think what goes on in the mind plays much role at all, like I mentioned in Numbers Opa says, but it's obvious the body and the speech are the servants of our mind. Our problem is we don't notice what's going on until it's too late. That's what's so shocking, you know. So, Buddha's view, his observation, is that necessarily every millisecond of what we think and do and say, and these are called actions, starting with the mental action, this is the meaning of law of karma, will necessarily leave seeds in the mind, and this really intricate process will eventually ripen in the future in that river of mental moments as in 4 ways. 1, the very type of rebirth we get when this consciousness leaves the body at the time of death, and that's dealt with again in great depth in the literature. Just now, one of my jobs is to edit books. I've just finished many years working on this book of Lamas Opas, which is now available. You know, so how to help people at the time of death, and it's going into great detail about the process, what happens, you know, what when the karmic seed ripens, what life we get, why we get, how we get. It's very intricate, very detailed. The Buddha's teachings are most fascinating. So that whatever we do, say and think, is stayed in the mind, doing its own trip. You know, like seeds in the ground. You know, seeds in the ground don't need a gardener for them to grow. Just take the universe as it is. It's just the way it is. It's a natural law. You know, we can harness it and work with it and learn it. Yeah, of course. Same here. So they'll ripen in 4 ways. The first way that our karma ripens, I'm getting to the mind, I haven't got to the mind yet, but karma works in the mind. This is where the mind comes into it, how we work with all this stuff. Taking karma as the law that runs the universe, so we have to learn to know it and harness it so we can be in charge of our own life instead of thinking everyone else is to blame, you know. So the first way our karma ripens, as they say, is the type of rebirth, so when our mind leaves the body, and eventually new mummy and daddy hop into bed, our consciousness runs there like a magnet, you know, with all these detailed descriptions of how and why. We, you know, they didn't make us, they're just lying there having fun. We stick our nose in, you know. Buddha's big surprise. Robina turns up, you know. Uh-oh, that's right. So the first way our karma ripens is the type of rebirth we get. The second one is actually the type of personality you've got, your tendencies. Every single thing that goes on in here is a tendency, right? Whether you want to kill, lie, steal, play football, whatever. Bunch of habits, basically. Bunch of habits. We come programmed with a bunch of habits. Third, and this is the one that's really interesting, you know, we're very social beings. We can see this, can't we? Ants, dogs, animals, humans, we're very social. We have mummies and daddies and siblings and aunties and uncles. We have enemies and friends and strangers. So we're always having intense relationships with each other. Well, then none of that goes astray, Buddha says. You know? So the mummy and daddy we run to, we've got an intense history with them. 3 of us are equal participants in this scenario. You know? You get the mother and father you deserve, basically. I mean, in the sense of deserve. You know? You've got intense karmic history with each other. See, this is where, again, it's utterly shocking to hear this. We know that if there's a thing called a law, and it's a natural law, no one's running it. No one's up there pulling the strings. And we know, therefore, you can learn the law, and once you've learned it, it's coherent, and it's consistent every time. Every time you put a pear seed in the ground, you'll get a pear tree, I promise, not an apple tree. Sure, other laws can intervene. This we know, but the law of botany is consistent, coherent, and we understand this. That's how come we can get 100-story buildings. How come you open your Apple box every time you get your perfect, you know, computer there, your iPad? Because we enter the law of cause and effect, and we use it to the level of genius in our world. Well, Buddha says the law of karma is the same. It's consistent, coherent. It plays itself out. No one's running it. We have to learn it so we can develop our own garden, you know, really. This is the Buddhist approach. And therefore, there's nothing random. This is beyond shocking to hear this. Bizarre to hear this. We know that if you're a Christian, God has his rules. He's got his plan, and it is not my business, and that's fine. I think to be a totally devoted Muslim and Catholic, I will never criticize it. God has his plan. It's not my job to know his plan. So it is coherent, but you can't see it, so you accept. That's profound. I'm not kidding. But the materialist view, we haven't found the answers yet, as we would say, wouldn't we? So most of the time we're pulling our hair out because we can't see any reason why most things happen. You know? Buddha's view, it's coherent and consistent, and the law of karma is what is the... So you have to learn it. If that's so, like if there is a law of botany, you can learn to harness your garden, you better learn the botany law, Same here with karma, Buddha's view. And it's coherent, and it's consistent, and it's not random. Nothing can be random. It's impossible. Whatever's in a garden, you might know the law of botany, but there's a law playing out. This is what Buddha says. Shocking to us, shocking. So now there's no sentient being you meet whom you haven't met before. There's no sentient being who does anything to you, good or bad, that hasn't happened before. It's not possible. Impossible. It can't be random or bad luck and good luck. We think this is just normal. No such concept in Buddhism. No such concept. It's kind of an intense concept. Therefore, we have intense history with each other. You know that sometimes when you meet each other, intensely strong relation. I always think of Romeo and Juliet. Actually, I always think of Tony and Maria in West Side Story. Because I got it on my iPad. I buy movies on my iPad, and I bought West Side Story a couple of years ago. I always remember vividly Tony and Maria, isn't it? The dance and the sharks and the jets all dancing, and then they see each other. Everything else goes away. So the Buddhist way is that's karma ripening. Enemies as well. Out of the blue, some horrible person, you can't stand the sight of them. Things happen. It's karma ripening. Seeds popping up. Everything is karma ripening. It's like using the analogy of seeds and fruits. It's not meant to be used in a cosmic way. This is the Buddha's explanation of the universe. So we meet these parents, strong history with those parents, With that mummy, that daddy, and then your siblings and the aunties and the uncles and all your group, your people, the convent, the nuns who taught me, the people I meet, whatever. So if you think of it simply, we meet sentient beings in this life, and there are some who are harm us and some who help us. Let's face it. Friends and enemies, let's face it. There's all the biggest bunch is called strangers who do neither. But, strangers come along and become friends and become enemies. We know that. Not random, Buddha says. There's strong karma between us. I mean, this is a shocking concept. We don't think this way at all. This is Buddha's view. So the first way karma ripens is the type of rebirth you get. Second is all your tendencies that occupy, the mind that occupies this type of rebirth. Lion, dog, same, Third is they call it your experiences. However you are treated by others, good or bad, this is the fruit of your actions and your relationship with these sentient beings. And fourth, they call it environmental karma, even the way the very physical world impacts upon us. Of course, again, like I'm saying in the literature, especially in the more esoteric teachings in Buddhism, the Vajrayana or Buddhist Tantra, there are these details, which is the same model of the Tibetan medical system is based on, which is coming again from these amazing Hindus, these amazing Indians, a sophisticated understanding of the physical universe in terms of the 4 elements, which is the same model we used back in the Middle Ages, isn't it? Galileo and that mob. Now we have these different elements, but the 4 elements are still the way they describe the physical world. There's detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between the elements and the mind. This is dealt with in the esoteric teachings. But understanding all that helps us understand the way karma works, So again, I keep repeating, it's a very different way of seeing the world. But this is the Buddha's view. So then the implications of this are what? Obvious. When you really begin to have this view, and it takes time to apply it because we're so addicted to the other view, I didn't ask to get born, it's not my fault, everything's good luck and bad luck, I deserve the good luck and don't deserve the bad luck, why is this happening to me, and going crazy, getting angry, getting all these dramas. These are the responses in our mind, which are the views of ego, which says I'm an innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, I believe my mummy made me, daddy made me, my mind's my brain, not my fault, can't help it. I mean, these philosophical views we have in our minds that we take for granted. Buddha's views are very different. So, of course, it's up to us to decide which views to take on board. And the implication of it is the point. So I can say for myself, coming from being a Catholic, then an old radical lefty, then a communist and a feminist, and all these other things, having these different views of the world, then trying to buy into and choosing consciously to take Buddhist views as my hypothesis, a huge change in me because of this. So that means, applying it, trying to practice it, it takes time, it's not natural, because we're so addicted to the other views, we get born with them. It's lessened anger, because if you have anger, one of the key things, let's get into the mind now, more detail, the way the mind works. The more we understand this idea that I mentioned before, that whatever goes on in our mental consciousness, whether it's called emotional or intellectual, it all comes down in Buddhist psychology to being, all of it, underpinned by conceptual stories. but at a very subtle level. So what's anger? How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's the outrage of anger, isn't it? Example. Well, if you have the Buddhist view of karma, that thought would not arise. So I always use this example. It's good to use extreme examples of these young. In 2003, Richard Gere, I was based in the States for many years, Richard Gere invited Dalai Lama to New York, and he also wanted to kind of work with, we all had Liberation Prison Project, and we were thinking of working together on prisoners, and he had an idea to invite 20 former prisoners to the meeting with the Dalai Lama. So Americans, a cross-section of Americans, black, white, Puerto Rican, male, female, Mexican, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison. And it was a very moving day. A few of us, like me, invited. It was very moving. All listened to all their stories and their suffering and their dramas. Then they met the Dalai Lama. They had a wonderful day. So what was interesting too, they invited 2 young Tibetan nuns. These young women, quite young, had been in prison for a couple of years in Tibet, had been sexually abused and tortured. So what's interesting, here are these women brought up with this view. Look into our world, how we take things for granted because it's just a world view. Where our minds are imbued with the view that our mummies made us, that daddy made us, the brain is the thing, the materialist view, even if we might be Christian or Muslim. We've got the materialist view very strong, and it is a philosophical viewpoint. It's a viewpoint about the world. Now they're imbued with the view of Buddhism. This is what they've learned since they're born. That's their natural view. It's like second nature to them, the view of karma, all these things. And of course, because they're little nuns, they study it hard and they practice it. They put their money where their mouth is, not just in the back burner, So there they are in this nightmarish situation, being tortured, being abused. Not cool. So of course they're suffering. Of course they're sad. There were tears, but they weren't angry. And I think this alone, for all the Americans, which is typical with the view that we've got, would be shocking. We in fact don't trust that. We think anger is a good. I'm not trying to be moralistic here, just talking. We almost think if you don't have anger, there's something wrong with you. But listen to the philosophical position that anger is. I put it this way, if it is true as fact that Buddha's wrong, let's say, and Jesus is wrong, and the materialist view is right, let's just say, fact, and you were indeed created by mummy and daddy, and you are only physical, meaning there's not a millisecond of you before conception, then it's correct to be angry. Because I have never met those ridiculous Chinese cars before. Why the hell are they jumping on me and abusing me? There's no logical reason. It's true. So anger is a reasonable response within that framework. But the Buddhist view, and these young women, there were tears, they were talking about their experiences, and at the end, they very quietly said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers. Because we realised we must have harmed them in the past. That's a typical Buddhist conclusion. No big deal for Buddhists. But of course for us, shocking, So of course, because of that, anger doesn't play a role. We've got to understand this. We just think anger is natural. But anger is a response to a series of assumptions. We have to unpack all this stuff, If you don't have the view, if you have the view that you came from the past, if you have the view that whoever you meet, you've met before, if you have the view that all the people who've been kind to you, loving and good and because of your own past virtue, then you obviously have the view that the stuff that's bad is because of your own past non-virtue. No big deal. It's not a special view. It's just natural. No, it's not shocking to them. So of course there's no anger. How could there be anger? Because anger says, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. It doesn't even arise in their mind, It's not kind of like they're suffering and suppressing it. It's natural to have that view. If karma is a serious view that you're trying to take on board, and for them it would be truly natural. Another friend of mine, Tibetan, this was years ago, he told me about how he was born. He had his mummy and daddy decided to make many Tibetans, so they had 13 babies. Very sweet. So anyway, he became a monk when he was 17, and this is in the 80s. And this is when there was the first kind of mini uprising against the Chinese communists since 59. It was all the young monks and nuns. They were the radicalised ones, They're out there demonstrating. There was this a real serious uprising, actually, and they all got slammed down and put into prison, blah, blah, blah. So he got arrested, and then he got released. He was tortured. Then he got released again. Then they demonstrated again, and then he got, then his friend had his head blown off, and then other ones got murdered, so he decided he better escape. And since he escaped to Nepal, his father got murdered, brother got murdered, whatever. He was telling me this story. And he was sad, like the nun, sad, tears. This is years ago, and I said to him, do you ever get angry? And I mean, it was very casual how he replied. He said exactly. He laughed and said, Robina, what for? He said, it's our own fault. He said it very casually. Well, those words are shocking to us. But he's speaking in colloquial, ordinary language. That is the natural response of a person with a view of karma. There's a no-brainer. It's not surprising to us, because it's their view, you know. It was quite shocking to hear, isn't it? Because we don't think this way. Of course he wouldn't be angry. Sad, yes. And that's why there's a complicated thing. We tend to think, well, if the Tibetans created the cause from past lives to have this bad stuff happen, then our view is, well, then they deserve it, so why are you trying to change it? That's the view we have. So if you see me punch him in the nose, and then he punches me right back, you'll tell me I deserve it, won't you? And then I have no right to complain. Well, it's the same. Just a couple of lies between punches, that's all. But the difference is Buddha says we are all in the same boat. Everybody has got countless past lives. We are all bumping into each other countless lives. I mean, I know it sounds hilarious. This ain't our view. There's this hilarious story they always quote from the sutras from the time of the Buddha. And it's always this oral tradition, so they just always tell the story in various ways. It goes like this. There's Sariputra, who's one of the disciples of the Buddha, one of the main dudes, you know. And these people have got these realizations and they're developed, they've got rid of ego, they've gone beyond delusions, they're clairvoyant. Clairvoyance, in the Buddhist view, taking this view of the mind that goes to a subtler level, clairvoyance is a natural capacity of all minds. Again, it's so cosmic for us, because the mind is more subtle. Again, it's coming from the Indians, you know, it's from this tradition. So there's this Shariputra who's got this clairvoyance, got these realizations, and he's doing his arms round, going around begging, you know, and he sticks his nose into this particular house in the village, and he goes, the son eats his father while he kicks his mother and nurses his enemy. I forget, something like that. So what he's seeing with his clairvoyance, I keep having to say it's always hilarious for us because it's so this is like science fiction for us. He said, the son, the man was nursing his enemy. He's nursing a baby, his cute little baby, you know. But it's the reincarnation of the bloke down the road who raped his wife, whom he killed. And because of his attachment to his wife, he gets born as the baby. So he's a baby, you know, my baby. That's his enemy. Then he's eating the fish. He's eating the fish from the back pond, and that's his daddy, because daddy was attached to fishing, so he's born as a fish. And he's kicking the dog, who's his mummy, because mummy was very attached to that place, got born as a dog there, and then he's kicking the dog, as they want to do, while she's eating her husband's bones, the fish. So, I mean, and then he said, what a farce samsara is. Okay? So, I mean, what can you say? So this is the Buddha's view. This is the Buddha's view. This is the view of the world I have. You know, I don't tell my sisters this. I mean, they think I'm I've got 7 siblings and we're very good friends, but we've got a very long-lasting decision. We do, because we don't fight now. We used to fight like cats and dogs as kids, but we are now very harmonious. Because we never talk about the things we disagree with. We wouldn't even go there. And so we don't suppress it. We just know it's foolish. Why would we do that? You know? And we rejoice in each other's good things, and we delight in each other's qualities, and we all laugh at each other's jokes. We almost all barrack for the Sydney Swans. And we therefore are harmonious, because, you know, we don't blur out our rubbish, you know. I mean, they know I'm a Buddhist. God knows what they think that means. But I never discuss like this. Even if they asked me, I'd crack a joke. I'd change the subject, you know, because they don't really want to know, you know. Do you understand? Unless they go online and listen to me on YouTube or something and hear my mad views and then just joke about me behind my back. I've no idea. But they don't seem to indicate that they do. Anyway, blah, blah. And depends, you know, I mean, yeah, anyway. So are we communicating here?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, well, and again, I'm not clairvoyant. I can't see that this is true. It sounds hilarious. But it's my working hypothesis. This is the one I'm trying to use. And the reason for me that I'm using this is because at least, and this is the point for me, there has to be some practical, experiential implications. So all I can tell you is me trying to use this, put my money where my mouth is, and I'm still going to talk about the mind, which is what we're going to be talking about, which is what you learn to do so you can harness this energy and understand the laws and so on and so forth, and therefore live according to them, is because it benefits me, first of all, first and foremost. It explains to me why I'm suffering, explains to me why other people are suffering, explains why good things happen, it's an explanation of why things are. And all I know is since a kid, since I first went to Mass, it's been my interest. You know? What can I say? It's been my interest, always my interest, to try and find out where the world is, why this. I was looking for a world view. So far, the last 40 years, it's been the Buddhist one for me. What can I say? And I'm relaxed with it. So far, so good. If I drop dead and I turn to dust, I don't mind. But if I discover the Buddha's right, I don't mind either. Either way, it doesn't matter. But my point is, whatever we think in here has to surely express itself in our life. And if it helps you become more moral, more kind, more wise and more happy, then honey, go for it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That's got to be the experiential implication of what we think. So all I know is with the materialist view, I just find that not very tenable because it makes you miserable. You've got no one to blame. You don't know why things happen. You're living in fear the whole time. That to me is the experiential implication of that philosophical position. Are you seeing my point? Now maybe you never... I mean, one of my sisters is interesting. Julie, one of my many dear sisters, whom I adore. We joke that she has never, ever asked the question, why anything? She's incredibly kind, compassionate, intelligent, wonderful, moral, good person, lives in complete morality, pays her bills, is generous, is kind, she's an incredibly good human being, naturally a good human being, naturally practices morality. But she's never bothered to just have any interest in God or not God or karma. We joke that she's never had those thoughts in her life. So you don't even have to have those thoughts. But all I'm saying is if you do, it's been my interest in my life, you know. That's why I'm buying into the Buddhist view. I find it most fascinating. I want to study it and learn it and try to apply it, you know. And that's our choice, of course. We don't have to. That's our call. We're the boss, not Buddha. So, one aspect of being the Buddhist, and not every person who is a Buddhist. I mean, if you're a Zen Buddhist, you would not hear any of these words. They're not interested in any of this. They're mainly into certain meditation techniques. So different Buddhist countries, traditions, take this on board in different ways, you know. This is the Tibetan Buddhist one, coming from the Tibetan monastic university system, which I appreciate a lot and have, great affection for and find very helpful for my mind. So, okay, let's look at then. So this is the world view I'm using to explain the whats and whys and hows. So then how do I learn then to work with my mind so I can apply these rules of botany, if you like? That means I've got to train my mind. That means I've got to lessen my delusions and grow my goodness, which is what he says we can all develop anyway, and utilise these different mechanical parts of my mind, the neutral parts, to help me do that job. So I've got to have some concentration meditation. I'll learn Buddhist psychology, and then I'll learn, as Lama Yeshe puts it, to be my own therapist in day-to-day life. Which means what? Which means to start to become more and more deeply aware of all the thousands of thoughts that are racing around in my head. I like to call them my roommates, you know. I'm not trying to be schizophrenic or anything, but really it's a very nice analogy. I like it a lot. Our heads are full, are they not, of roommates. So we can see, those roommates, sometimes the ones running their show, I look back at my life, they're the ones called anger and attachment and fear and jealousy and low self-esteem and poor me and not fair and arrogance and how dare, all the dramas, Luckily we've got access to our virtues. Aren't we fortunate? Otherwise we'd be running around raping and killing. So we can access love and wisdom and kindness. But sometimes in my life, it's amazing that I didn't go and kill everybody. I mean, it's amazing that the negative roommates didn't really run the show. But luckily, we have the access, and I can discover them and see them, to love and wisdom and intelligence and kindness and generosity and forgiveness and morality. Those roommates are there. But sometimes they're hiding under the bed and in the wardrobes because the other guys are completely running the house, Do you understand? And so part of the problem... Maybe you've got a different house than me. So part of the problem is this, and this is, I think, now kind of getting to your point about negativity, We all recognise these words, don't we? Anger, depression, loathing. And look at I think what we instinctively feel is that these are at the core of my being. Because they're so horrible, when they're really rampant, I don't think there's ever a thought, well, this is going to pass. It's okay, Robina. It's not too bad. The anger is not really who you are. It's okay, darling. It'll pass. No way did I ever think that. As far as I'm concerned, and even into my first few years of being a Buddhist, truly it was as if anger was my middle name. It was truly who I was. There was never a thought that this is not my nature. In other words, we identify strongly with these neuroses, as if they're truly at the core of my being. Now, what's fascinating is that's reinforced in our psychology that would say these are natural, insofar as you'd be unnatural if you didn't have them. So the Buddha's view is, sorry, I found it to be so that they're not, that if you like, that they're not natural, they're delusional. They're natural insofar as we all do have them, but he says, you know what, they're conceptual, they're misconceptions, which we have to see at a very subtle level, which is demanding this rigour of being our own therapist, to unpack and unravel this stuff to a subtle degree. Then we can begin to see how we can change them. They are not at the core of our being. This for me is a revelation. So when we can start to have confidence that yes, there's anger there, yes, there's depression, yes, there's jealousy, but it's all right, Robina. It doesn't define you, darling. Even just to have a little bit of confidence in that is unbelievable. Because I think what causes so much of our pain is when this stuff becomes rampant, when bad things happen and we can't cope, we literally lose our mind, We go mad. Many people go mad completely. Do you understand? Because it's like it's so horrible, we can't stand it. And we therefore truly, if we really just knew it was a storm and the sun will come tomorrow, we can bear the storm. But we really believe they're permanent. That's why we can't see when things are bad, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Isn't it? But as soon as you know that it is serious, but it's all right, it'll pass. It's already a miracle. But you've got to really learn to understand the truth of this. And we know it from our past experience, but we forget. So this is the thing the Buddha's saying. There is many mistakes that our mind makes. We're like believing in lies. And this lie we're discussing here is this lie that somehow whatever's going on is permanent. Like, when you're in love or something good's happening, you found a good job. Oh, finally, everything's great. Everything's great. Instinctively, we believe it'll last forever. She laughs all the time, this one. Do I make you laugh? Is it me who makes you laugh? Is that okay?
Because it's true.
Oh. Oh, good, darling. I'm happy. She's seeing the truth. So I always remember, I quote, I read all these newspapers and magazines. I love reading about human beings, and I always quote poor Nicole Kidman. She's my good example here. It's terrible because I like her. I read this interview in Vanity Fair. This was like 20 years ago when she was with Tom Cruise. Maybe not 20 years ago. When did he leave her? When was it? Roughly. When he left her for Penelope Cruz, didn't he? Not 20 years ago. It can't be 20 years. Maybe 10, 15 years ago. Anyway, whatever it was, I remember reading this interview. And at the end of the interview, she said, "We will be together until we're 80. Now, we understand that, don't we? We understand that, don't we? When you're really in... Like, there she was in this amazing life with her husband, the kids, and when you've got your little bubble of your life, we've all got it, haven't we? To some degree, whatever our bubble is. It's life. It's just how it is. And you go... like tonight, you're going to go home, right? Because you can go home, unless you live in a tent on the street or something. You expect your house to be there, don't you? Don't you expect your house to be there? And you don't think, maybe my house burned down. You don't think that, do you? We just know our house will be there. And therefore we know that Tom will be there. And that's what grasping at permanence means. Buddha says this major mistake we make deep in the bones of our being. And you know why? Because the deepest illusion in this hierarchy of these neuroses, which you learn about in depth in the Buddhist psychology, that virtually, as far as the Four Noble Truths are concerned, run our lives, is the main source of our suffering, is simply this cute word called attachment, which is this primordial energy of dissatisfaction, which gives rise to intense craving for something. All these are the functions of attachment. It's multifaceted, which then gives rise to manipulating to get the thing, which gives rise to making the thing look more delicious than it really is, which makes you then, expect to get the result, because this attachment runs the show. And I tell you, it's so primordial, this level of mind. Because of this craving, which is running every second, the motor that runs us propels most of our decisions and everything. It's very hard to see it. Because of this attachment, another way of putting attachment is, it's a complete junkie for the nice things. It can only bear the nice things. So every millisecond of our daily life, and we are programmed with this from countless lives, we are constantly searching out the nice things. Nice smell, nice taste, nice feeling, nice this, nice that. And we know that the millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's the arising of the state of mind called aversion, which is expressed as anger or as depression, if it goes in. And these are really subtle. They happen 1,000 times a day. We only notice when Vesuvius explodes, you know. Oh, I must be angry, you're about to kill somebody. So the point is, because of this intense attachment that only can bear the nice things, then it naturally, we then add permanence onto it. We think it's going to be forever. Because we can't bear the thought that it won't be, quite simply. It's unbearable for us. Because these delusions are so neurotic, you know. So of course she assumes, because it's delicious now, of course we're going to be together till we're 80. But it's interesting. Then she said, next sentence, I remember it. And of course, if we won't be, I will be devastated. And she was. I remember reading later. She was in fetal position. So her mother kicked her off and told her to get on with it. And then she met fellow, what's his name? Keith. Yeah, she's happy. And she's got 2 gorgeous daughters, Faith and Sunday. And I remember one time, maybe they'd moved by now, they had a gorgeous apartment in New York. They're mostly in Nashville. They've got this gorgeous apartment in New York, and they drive into the garage on the ground floor, and the garage is a lift, and it goes up to their floor. Isn't that wonderful? That's just great, I think. Anyway. So the thing is, this is attachment, and we've all got this. So because the status quo is everything is gorgeous, of course we assume it'll be like that forever. This is one of the worst reasons we suffer. And so of course when you go home and your house is burnt down, or you go home your hubby's left you, this is why we're shattered. And we think we're shattered because Tom left. She thinks she's broken-hearted because Tom left her. No. It's because she had a fantasy that he wouldn't. There's lies in our mind. This is really the way Buddha's talking. I'm saying it in a blunt Australian way. But these delusions, this word delusion is kind of tasty. This negative states, and this is the thing in the Western models, we don't make this crystal clear distinction between what the Buddha would refer to as virtues and non-virtues. It sounds so religious, you know. The non-virtues, or the deluded ones, they are distorted, exaggerations, disturbing, afflictions, but crucially, they're delusions. This is a great word. If someone accused you of being delusional, you'd be very offended. Because you know they're accusing you of not being in touch with reality. Well, this is precisely bullseye. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. That these neuroses, they've got 2 main characteristics. One is they're disturbing, and one of the terms is disturbing emotion. Well, check the last time you were jealous, depressed, or angry. It's hardly a no-brainer. You were disturbed. It's obvious, you know. But the real one that is harder to see, and once we do see this, we are on track with understanding Buddhism. I mean this. Is that they're deceptive, they're delusions, they're liars. Which means, finally, beneath the emotional component, which is the only thing we're aware of when it hits our bodies, that's just the tip of the iceberg for the Buddha, that they're underpinned by, impelled by, informed by deeply held conceptual elaborate stories that are lies. This is really fascinating. I swear to you, Western scientists and psychologists will be fascinated by this. But they don't. The best the West can learn about is bloody mindfulness. Excuse me. Excuse me. Rhonda and Claudio. But are we communicating here? And somebody really was offended when I said this. They wrote to the centre, they left the course early, and they said I was really rude about Vipassana Buddhism, and I was so monstrous, and that I was aggressive, and he thought I was quite shocking, actually. But try and get my point. I think the view we have of Buddhism is so superficial. There's nothing wrong with it. It's amazing that it's coming into the world. But we've got to understand the way the Buddha's view of the mind was, coming from these amazing Indians 3,000 years ago. You don't understand? It blows my mind every time I learn it more and more. It's so sophisticated. Clear, precise, detailed descriptions of the cognitive process of our own mind at subtler levels. Way beyond the feeling level, way beyond the gross body level, way beyond the emotional level, which is about the best we can do, you know. Way to go, you know. And the level to which we can cultivate this mind of ours, it's mind-boggling if you read some of the natural consequences of this type of practice. It's quite remarkable. It's not a joke when Lama Yeshe says being your own therapist, you know. Are we communicating here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, of course, you know, we've got to learn if we want to use Buddha's technique seriously. And the thing is, remember, he doesn't own this stuff. He is not a creator. You can't copyright botany, you know. No one owns botany. You can be considered a good botanist, the same as being a good Buddhist, but you don't own this stuff. Buddha says this is natural law. This is how things occur. And the point about the mind is that it's what creates karma. So if every millisecond what you think and do and say leaves seeds in the mind and brings fruits, you'd better learn to know your mind, baby. No question. Isn't it? That's the job. That's the job of being a Buddhist, okay? That's it, I've finished. Sort of. I haven't really, but that's the essence of being a Buddhist. The two main areas, learning about karma, which runs in the mind, and learning about the mind so you can manipulate and use the law of karma. Why? To turn yourself into this amazing person. For your sake and the sake of others. That's the essence of it. So now questions, come on. Yeah.
If the true nature of our mind is being clear and aware, free of all negativity.
Yes, exactly right.
And with all positive qualities.
That's right.
Why is the what did you call it? The primordial kind of why is attachment so primordial?
Oh, okay. Okay, I think it's a misconception of the term that our minds are naturally pure. What it means is the potential is always there for our consciousness. Would you agree that water, you know, using a simple analogy, water is naturally pure? Meaning it's 2 bits of H and 1 bit of O. It's naturally clear and pure, isn't it? But it can be polluted, can't it? So strictly speaking, pollution is not at the core of the water, is it? And no matter how polluted it is, you know it doesn't fundamentally affect the true nature of the water. Would you agree with that? You could drink it and die, but it ain't the water that poisons you, it's the pollution. So all Buddha's saying is you can extract the pollution. And as long as there is mind, its true nature is to be clear and pure. And it sounds cute to say it, but there's logic to it when we study it in more depth, in the way Buddha describes the nature of the delusions and things like this. Okay, there's another way of talking about delusions, and also the mind, and also pure. There's ways of talking. There's marvellous different techniques in Buddhism. But fundamentally, the Buddhist point, which is, again, like I said, shocking, is that, the deluded states of mind, which are ancient and primordial, not as if they started at some point. It's not as if we were pure once and lost the plot, not like that. But they're deeply instinctive because we've practiced them for so long. And that's why we assume they're normal. And that's why all of our Buddhist Western models assume they're normal. I mean, who, Mr. Freud and Mr. Jung, we have to say, well, people like you and me, who assume that this stuff's normal. So that's why they say it's normal. So, they didn't hear Buddha, who says, and no, I found it's not. You understand my point? So it feels like it's so normal and natural, but therefore we never question it. But if we look deep enough and look at this logic of the way Buddha's using, we can see how they are, in fact, adventitious and therefore can be removed. Does that answer your question or not?
I was kind of wondering more about, from a Christian point of view, people would think,
you can hear over there?
The Creator, created everything, so we don't need to worry about, you wonder where all that came from. I don't know if Christians ever wonder where God came from.
No, it's not. No, because it's not a non-question.
Yeah,
God is always,
right.
has been, is, and there's no question about it.
Yeah.
That's just the way they talk.
So, but in Buddhism, there's not that kind of logic. Because,
about what?
About where everything came from. Why are minds so negative?
Buddha's answer is because we practiced it. What do you mean? What do you mean? No, you're looking for a first moment. We all do. Every single one of us asks for a first moment. You all want to know where it began, don't you?
Well,
That's your question. No, stop. But stop. That's your question, isn't it? You want to know where it began.
Why are there minds?
That's right. The assumption is that they began, isn't it? Now listen. Can you hear that? There's an assumption in that. When did my mind begin? Isn't there? Can you accept that first? Can you hear the question?
Yeah, I think.
There has to be an assumption there that a point was when there weren't minds and then somehow their mind started. So Christians say God did it, And you don't ask where God came from. So you're asking, well, where did mind come from? Well, Buddha says your mind is a beginningless continuity of mental moments. There's not a first moment. This is beyond shocking because we've got to ask, why do we think that? Buddha's sort of saying, what do you want a first moment for? How silly. And why you can't have a first moment. I know saying it is ridiculous. It's because of the law of cause and effect. So, okay, listen. If we take the law of cause and effect, in general, in the universe, could you accept that whatever's here now, this is the effect of some causes, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You agree?
Yes.
And those previous moments were the effect of previous causes. Do you agree? So how could you, by definition, have an effect at some point that didn't have a previous cause?
Yes, I agree.
Therefore, intellectually is enough, at least, to think about it. Therefore, from the Buddha, there's no need to have a first moment because there can't be such a thing. To ask for a first moment is a misconception coming from a series of delusions in our mind.
Mm.
That's all.
Yeah.
So we have to think about it, you know. Doesn't answer your question, though, does it?
Like I do think about beginningless mind. I do.
So what do you mean you think about it? What does the thinking? The thinking has to bring results. So what results does it bring you?
Well, I see that there was no beginning. It was always.
Well, why do you
there.
ask them? No, why do you ask them and where the minds come? Why minds? Why are their minds? Because the assumption is they have to have been created from somewhere, started somewhere, isn't it? Would you agree? Yeah. I remember the Dalai Lama in one of these, science things, and this is just, paraphrasing. He said, "Big Bang, no problem. Just not the first Big Bang. That's all." So, because the Buddha's view, if you take this Vajrayana model, the Buddha's view is that there is matter and there are minds, essentially, and matter is the four elements. There is the four elements. That's it, and they are beginningless necessarily. But it's so shocking to us because we assume there has to be a first Big Bang, either God or something, But if cause and effect is applying, you can't have a thing that's an effect of no cause. It just doesn't make sense. Just even intellectually, it's meaningless, So the Buddha's view is, therefore, consciousness is beginningless. Matter is beginningless. And in Vajrayana, they deal with in great detail the relationship between these two. It's most fascinating, Certainly how karma works. So the real point then is to deal with what is here now. Mm. So I've got to look in my mind. There's anger, there's fears, there's jealousy, there's this, there's that. To learn just how to sort it out, how to interpret it, how to analyse it, how to understand it, and how to change it. So the big question is, then, how do you change your mind, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Do you agree? Mm-hmm. Well, it's hardly rocket science. We're doing this every day. We call it learning. You've never heard of music in your whole life, and you go to school, you don't just sit there with your hands over the piano hoping Bach will channel through you, do you? You've got to fill your mind with millions of complicated conceptual thoughts called musical theory, don't you? Don't you? Yes. When you learn music, when you learn cooking, when you learn mathematics, when we learn everything we do, you learn to drive a car. It's so complex, the number of thoughts you've learned. They're conceptual thoughts. So did you not change your mind from not knowing music to knowing music? Did you not change your mind from not knowing numbers to knowing numbers? We can change our minds. We're geniuses at it. Can you not agree with me? Mm-hmm. But our problem is we make this massive, bizarre distinction between what we think as creative and intellectual thinking and emotional. I mean, we are demented when it comes to emotional, in my opinion. We're like infantile. And mostly because we believe someone made me like this, it's not my fault. The first second I'm angry, it's blaming somebody. Everything in my being wants to find out who did it, How dare you? It's so primordially instinctive, isn't it? It's fascinating. You've got to agree. So, what's this gentleman's name? What's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew. Let's say Andrew is really good at football. Are you, Andrew?
Not anymore.
Okay, there you go. So let's say, and I say to Andrew, "What? Oh God, Andrew, why are you so good at football?" Like amazed, So Robina's, I have practiced for 20 years. So you're not surprised, right? But let's say I say to Andrew, no, I'm sure he's not angry. "Why are you angry, Andrew?" He'll say, "Oh, that's not my fault. That's my wife's fault, my mother's fault, my daddy's fault." There's no responsibility. We love to take responsibility for the fact that we know how to play football. But we can't stand to take responsibility to know how to be angry. Are you seeing my point? And that's reinforced by our models. When you go to your therapist, she wants to know what it is that happened, where's this needle in what haystack, why is Robina always angry, why is she always jealous, what happened back then that caused it. Is that not how we think?
Yes.
Is this not the natural way we think? Buddha says, a load of rubbish. Okay, he's not saying my father wasn't horrible. He's not saying it didn't even play a role. He's not saying that. In fact, he's not even saying, I slightly exaggerate. He's not saying you shouldn't look at the external conditions. They do play a role. We are very intimately connected to the external world. Everything that goes on affects us. But all he's saying is, Robina, you're missing the main point, petal, which is your mind. But our trouble is we think, we know there's anger in the mind, or jealousy, or fear, whatever it might be. We know that. But the view we have about it is that it's, he made me angry. Is it not true? Or it's my genes, or it's my chemicals, or my grandfather or something. I was born this way. So in other words, it's very instinctive and primordial within us to get away, to get it out. We can't bear to own it, which is, itself is fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. We're happy to own being good at football. Let's say, Andrew has stopped playing football, he's now lazy. He'll be brave enough to admit that he's not good at football because he hasn't practiced football. He won't blame everybody else. He might, but you know what I'm saying. We're prepared to own these things. And we're talking about our mind here. Because if he didn't have any thoughts about football, he couldn't kick a football. It's his thoughts. So we all own this. Easy. We're very rational. He knows that if he doesn't learn football, he can learn to learn it. We know that. But to say that you can learn to be not angry, that doesn't make sense to us, because we think, why the hell should I not be angry? Because it's his fault. So we don't even want to learn to look at anger, because it's always someone else's fault. I mean, this is how we are. So it's an uphill battle to even get to the point of owning my own anger, my own hurt, my own pain. And the Buddha's reason isn't punitive, which is how we hear it, like blaming, like you're a sinner. No, he says we should be weeping with compassion for ourselves, because this is what's breaking my heart. This is how we're so schizophrenic, We can't see this. If, Andrew's my boyfriend and he leaves me for a younger version, picks up her. Let's say. You didn't know that, did you? You didn't know that, did you? Let's say, Andrew's given me up for a younger version. It's like, I forgot what I was going to say now. I forget what I was going to say.
You're right on the edge.
Yeah. I know. I got lost. No, yeah, I mean, what was I saying about the anger and all the delusions there? All
You got jealous.
Oh, that's right. Yes, exactly. I did. Yeah, that's right. So I mean, okay, well, yeah. So no, okay, yeah. We know. Okay, I know I'm angry. I know I'm broken-hearted. But this is what's interesting, isn't it? You see me sobbing, let's say, and you'll say, "What's wrong, Robina?" And I will give you an elaborate description of what Andrew did, won't I? Mm-hmm. So you'll immediately feel sorry for me, and you'll say, "Oh, that poor Robina, she's allowed to be angry," won't you? Mm-hmm. And you'll uphold my right to be angry, and you will never tell me that I should try and change being angry, or might eventually, because you maybe get sick of me complaining. You understand? You understand? But we have this massive view that we're allowed to be angry. Where the more horrible Andrew was, the more mean the boss was, the more horrible that whoever it was, the more we are right to be angry. We are right to be depressed. We are right to be jealous. So we hold on to our right to be these things. And I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to give it up, but it's our view about it that keeps us frozen, stuck in stone, Because we can't, if you say to me, well, Robina, I know Andrew really was a creep and everything. I really understand it's horrible. But darling, you don't need to hurt yourself so much. You could try and change your anger. I'll be offended because I'll think you're blaming me. This sounds like you're blaming the victim. And this is a difficult topic. This is a very difficult topic because it sounds like you're blaming the victim. But it's not. Even forget karma, forget reincarnation, forget any of that. Buddha's main point, and I mean, again, he doesn't own this, we can all see it's true, is if you can change something, if I can get Andrew to come back to me and change it and all make it nice again, well, then he says, go for it. But what if you can't change it? Then what are you going to do? And if we really begin to realize that my anger, my depression, my jealousy, my fears, my low self-esteem are what break my heart, we will weep for ourselves, and then we will find any method possible to change. But because we hold on to our right, like as if it's like I'm allowed to stab myself, It's really very bizarre, because this is our view. It's quite shocking. It's so loaded, you know. But this is the Buddhist point. If you forget karma or anything, if we could just see that these neuroses are, we know they're breaking our heart, but to stop the philosophy, but I'm allowed to beat it, as his fault. If we just cop that one, realise he's a creep, let him go, and then see what I can do here. Then see if I can change this for my own sake. It's not a moralistic issue. It's not like, you know, becoming a victim. It's the opposite. Do you understand? This is the worst part of us. We really don't see the harm we're doing to ourselves. And this is the Buddha's real point. When you read the literature, it doesn't sound like, I mean, Tibetans sound more fundamentalist, I tell you, they're unbelievable. But it's really meant to be this one. It's for our own sake. It's for our own sake. Then, once you put yourself together, you can see others are all in the same boat, and you have compassion for them then. I always use this extreme example. This woman on death row, I remember reading about her like 30 years ago. She got arrested. I read her memoir. American woman. She's in Florida. She's hitching with a hippie husband and a couple of hippie kids. They get picked up by two blokes. The blokes get picked up by the coppers. The blokes kill the coppers and blame the hippies. So they're on death row in Florida. They're cop killers. You're the most evil person in the universe, you know. She was there for 17 years. She got out eventually, like a miracle. Husband even got executed. Can you imagine the nightmare? Just try and think of the nightmare of that. Lost the kids. This hell on earth. Hell on earth. Hell on earth. So at some point, she said, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. I mean, that's completely mind-boggling, isn't it? And we love to read about people like this, but listen to it. And all you can say is, she must have had such clarity, such courage, and I have to say it, intelligence. And she couldn't have had too much anger. Because I think if you've got a lot of anger, you go mad. There's no way in the universe something like anger can ever help you change. Because you absolutely, the worst of the worst victim mind is anger, you know. I'm trying to be punitive here. I know, I recognise it. She has to have not had much anger. It's like a miracle. Absolutely like a miracle. She got out after 17 years. I can't believe it. And then I remember reading, I love all my newspapers, and one of my favourite sections is New York Times wedding sections in the weekend. I love it. Love reading about human beings. Honestly, I love it. It's Crystal my mill. So I remember reading her. She was one of the special featured marriages. She went to Ireland one time after she got out of prison. She's like 70-something now, same age as me. She got out. She went to some conference in Ireland, and she met this ex-IRA fellow who'd been in prison for years, and they fell in love and got married. I was so happy for her. But she found some happiness, you know. I mean, she was this amazing human being. But isn't that pretty stupendous? I mean, we love to read about things this way, but we should join the dots. Because you look at when we've been accused of the smallest things, and we even still stuff that happened when we were children we can't give up. Still, it hurt. It's like a stab in our heart when we remember it. Because we can't let go of these things. It's so painful, isn't it? And this is the natural thing about ego. It's just because they're addicted to negativity. It's a job, it's their job, you know. And their ancient habit. But when we can start to realise, and she's the point, she said they couldn't take my mind from me. She saw it as the mind. Mind and consciousness, Buddha says, feelings, emotions are all mind. And this is the point in Buddhism, which is hard to see, that the emotional component. Oh yeah, at the same time, I read about this other fellow, also on death row, also innocent, and he's a normal one. He's what we consider normal. He went completely out of his brain, screaming like a maniac as long as he had a voice. I did not rape and kill that woman. So completely tormented. Now we call that natural. And we feel sorry for him. I mean, it's beyond terrible that we can't see that how we harm ourselves. Can you see this? Can you see it's so bizarre that we don't see it. That our own delusions harm us. Right there, the anger now harms me. No matter what Andrew did to me. That's one story. But now let's look at my mind. And that's the part. That's all Buddha does is run with this one. Yes, Andrew was a creep. Yes, Robina. He might have he has a reason for why. Forget that even. Forget the karma one. This woman didn't talk about karma. She wasn't a Buddhist. But she had this amazing capacity, this intense courage and humility to know that it's the anger was harming her. And you hear many people say this. We just don't hear it properly. They say, oh yeah, I wouldn't want to be angry, that hurts me. People say it. People know it. That's what I'm saying. Buddha doesn't invent this stuff. He doesn't run this. He doesn't own this. He just knows it well, I'd say. And it's the hardest thing we'll ever do. So of course people harm us. The world is full of it. Yes, recognise what they did. But then see if we can change our mind. Because we can't change anything. If we can't change anything else, this is our trouble. We go mad, bashing our heads against big walls. But the hardest one to see, which just takes time, I think, because we're so addicted to feelings. We're junkies for feelings. We think feelings are everything. But what we mean by a feeling is when it hits the body. This is why when I was a kid, and still later, whatever, because anger is a very common habit for me, I didn't take long to know I was angry because the words are out the mouth almost instantaneously. But another one of you might not shout and yell, but it takes you years to recognise that this internalised aversion, which is when attachment doesn't get what it wants because you're now depressed and you can't get out of bed one morning because it only hits the body then. A friend of mine who was a devoted Buddhist. It took her 60 years, 50 years to remember certain abuse when she was a kid and all this anger raging up that she'd suppressed for 50 years, So what I'm saying is, feelings, we mean by that is when the body is affected. Because that's what we think, the body's the boss. Lama Yeshe says we make the body the boss. But the Buddhist view is, when we get some single point of concentration, even a little bit, even beginning to step out of our own head and focusing the mind so we can't help but hear all the crazy thoughts. That's the real job. Then, as we get better and better at this, plus using the Buddhist model, which describes these states of mind quite precisely, differently from how we think, then we can start to use that as our model to look into our mind and then, not just when it's vomiting out the mouth, but you're seeing your mind more clearly every day. You bring to bear in your daily life this skill to see your mind, to be more objective as it's happening. And you can actually do the cognitive process of arguing with yourself. Bring out your virtuous roommates to argue with anger and jealousy before they go kill somebody. Do you hear my point? That's what you're doing. It's a practical job, but really hard on, full on, You've got to be aware, got to notice, got to hear. And because all these emotions are informed by, that are actually expressions of the conceptual story. When we get to see this, we are really on track with understanding Buddhist psychology. One more thing to say too, and I want questions. This business of learning how to meditate, learning mindfulness and everything. It's fantastic, amazing. It's so amazing that the world is doing it more and more these days. It's incredible. But I'd like to say a couple of things. We know that because we can't stand the pain of our bad relationships and our hurt and our fears, we hear about meditation, but we think of it as an alternative to a pill. We think of it as a method. In other words, if you're blissfully happy, you don't think to meditate because we assume it's only something you do because you're feeling pain and you want to make it go away. That is grotesquely mistaken. It's got nothing to do. The second mistake we make is it's a relaxation technique. This concentration meditation is a fiercely disciplined, like I said, rigorous, demands fierce discipline and rigor, disciplined, skillful technique, psychological skill, the goal of which is to get single-pointed concentration. Why? So you can start to be your own therapist. So you can start to unpack and unravel this crazy mind of ours. That's the purpose. So from that perspective, it's got zero to do with making all the thoughts go away. That's just like making the pain go away, but you still got the cancer. I'm very happy. Drugs do that. They're wonderful, but you're not curing the bloody cancer. Make the pain go away, yes, but you've got to get to the root of it. And that means you've got to see the cancer. You've got to go to the doctor, and they're going to be delighted with their microscope to see the disgusting cancer, because now they know how to analyse it and fix it. Are you with me, people? We're going to be able to bring the microscope of our mind onto our own mind, to go in deeper, to hear these elaborate conceptual stories of ego and attachment and this and that, and hear these crazy maniacs in there, hear them crystal clear, and hear how they're causing me so much suffering. So we've got to be brave to own these states of mind, not just to make them all go away. That's just ridiculous. In fact, in the typical texts, when they describe this single point of concentration technique, it's described in terms of 8 stages. 9 stages. They say one of the first signs of success at the first of the 9 is you think you're getting worse. But you're not. You're hearing your thoughts, that's all. They're going, even Western psychology says it's like 1,000 thoughts a second. Buddha agrees. But we don't notice them until they're shouting loud. Like it's like, you know, you go to, where are we, Melbourne or Sydney? Melbourne, okay, so I was just in Sydney, yeah. Like if you go to the MCG and there's 95,000 voices all shouting and you're a couple of kilometres away, what you hear is a big roar, isn't it? But you know it's the MCG, and you know it's 95,000 individual voices all saying something. But you can't hear the voices, can you? Just a roar. That's our mind. It's a roar, all the time, a quiet roar, sometimes a loud roar. We can't distinguish one thought from a bloody other. Excuse me. Are you hearing me, people? The only ones we notice is when they shout loud and then the body's affected. Oh, I must be angry. I better go to the doctor, you know. But it's too late. The Vesuvius has exploded already. So we've got to learn to see our minds way deep underneath, and so we can catch them and work on them before. So I can, you know, and so Andrew's my husband again, let's say. He hasn't left me yet. You know, and there I am. I've come home early for work, and he's late. And I'm jealous. I get a tendency to be jealous. Already you can see the drama coming. In 10 minutes, I'm worked up to a point of fever pitch, aren't I? All the stories going crazy in my head. He this. I never stop for 1 second. I never question any of my thoughts. I'm convinced I'm right, aren't I? You understand? And he comes to the door and I explode. Is it not true how we work like this? Yeah. Now imagine if I'm working on my mind. I catch the jealousy. I know what's happening. I listen to myself and I talk to myself. It's okay, Robina, wait till he gets home. Be reasonable. See what's going on. You don't know what's really happening. You know, let's just see when he comes home, you know. And this already takes a huge amount of work to have that level of stability and resilience and clarity without buying into your maniacs in your head. And then when he comes to the door, hello, darling, how are you? Oh, God, Robina, my mobile broke. The car broke down. I'm so sorry, darling. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Instead of the other drama. I mean, this is what working on your mind means. It's not cosmic. It's not religious. This is really hard work. But you've got to have courage to do this, do we not? Because we love to believe the dramas. We're like suckers for the dramas. We believe the truth completely of the dramas. So this is part of the work, is to, it might be true. He might be cheating on me. But let's find the facts first. Do you understand my point? But it's so hard. Because these delusions are like infants. Infants, and they destroy us. Are we communicating?
Yeah.
This is practical. I keep saying Buddha does not own this. He just is really good at it, is what I'd like to say. That's all. So thank you, Buddha. I'm a great fan. So any questions now? Come on. It's 9:12. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Any questions? Come on, please, people. Are we communicating here? Did I answer some of your points about the rigour, what I'm talking about? Good, darling.
Can I just,
Yes, come on. Yes.
Talking about anger,
Yeah.
Robina, we live in a society that does not do anger.
That's right.
And so the interesting thing is that when I feel
Yes.
angry,
Yes.
I immediately blame myself and repress it.
Okay, right.
Because it's so,
I see.
it's just not done enough.
No, exactly. I understand, darling. So, okay, it is very interesting, isn't it?
It is, because it's actually become quite a sophisticated way of engaging with this emotion
I understand.
that it's almost like a self-esteem. If you can't control this, then you're...
Okay, so then, Well, first of all, let's look at the difference between. Depends on the context. Like if I'm angry with you just because you spoke too loud, instead of I'm angry with you because you go and try to kill me. You know what I mean? Or you try to kill my dog or something. So that's the kind of anger we tend to think is valid, isn't it, in the world? Like political anger is sort of good, isn't it? What do you think?
I'm thinking of,
You're
for
thinking of
example,
what?
if you're walking down the street
Yeah.
and a person who's has special needs starts yelling and screaming,
Okay.
you immediately move away from
Okay,
it.
right.
You don't go anywhere near that
Because?
person
Because.
because you're frightened.
Oh, I see. Okay, because that looks like anger.
It's
You mean
anger
like that?
Because they're gesticulating.
No, that's right.
and
That's right. Yes.
They're swearing and.
Okay. So then, so why don't you say more then? So the point are you suggesting something or asking something or
Well,
making
I'm
on.
interested in this response on my behalf.
of other people's anger? You
Yeah,
mean to
as-
response to anger?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I withdraw immediately.
Oh, I see. For other people's anger.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So we're afraid of it, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Or
Yes.
the car driver, I suppose we'd all have that experience
Yes.
where we're driving and someone just puts the horn
That's
on.
right. Exactly.
And you just feel this,
Right.
all the hair
Yes.
going up.
Okay.
your
Okay. I hear. Okay. Good. This is massive. Okay. There's many things going on here. Let's try and unpack it, okay? Huge things going on here. So many things. I hope we've got time. Okay. All right. So, okay. So first of all, let's just make this statement that let's say you're a highly realized spiritual practitioner who's done all this work and who has lessened all these delusions and is stable and steady and resilient and reasonable and calm and content, self-confident and kind and compassionate. Let's say you've done that work. Then when that happens, you wouldn't blink an eye. You'd see what's going on exactly. There'd be no fear. You wouldn't be disturbed by it. You'd understand where he's coming from and you'd have compassion. You might get out of his way because you don't want to be punched in the nose. But it wouldn't come from any drama whatsoever. So I think, first of all, it's really important to establish that that's a possibility. If you really advance at it. It's like if you see Federer play, you know, wow, it's possible to play that like that. But I'm only at grade 1. So that's reasonable. So that's what Buddha's saying. So therefore, let's look at what it is in us that can't cope with other people's dramas. Or for that matter, can't cope with suffering. Do you understand? So, okay, let's analyse it. So in this, I like to say there's like this hierarchy of these neuroses in this particular category called negative or delusional states of mind. And the root one, and we don't even have a term for this in our culture. I think the very thing that this delusion says isn't accurate is what our world assumes to be true. And this delusion, they call it, the deepest one, they call it ego grasping. We've all got that. There's this very primordially held, deeply instinctive, so primordial that we really don't have a proper name for it in our culture at all, I would say. Deeply held instinctive sense of a separate, bereft, fear-based I, a neurotic sense of I, basically. A neurotic sense of over-exaggerated, distorted I. So in its nature, it's miserable and lonely and bereft and cut off and separate. So therefore, naturally, what that ego grasping gives rise to in this hierarchy is this next delusion, which for the Buddha, like I mentioned, is the main source of suffering, is this called attachment. But not the way we think of attachment. It's a primordial sense of dissatisfaction, which gives rise to the next, like I mentioned before, it therefore gives rise to constant craving. And this craving, this neediness is like a junkie, like I mentioned before. And this is so subtle. It's there, it's like just deep in our bones, propelling most of our habits, most of what we do. It is a junkie that can only bear the nice things. So you could therefore say the millisecond that attachment, so you're walking down the street, this instinctive attachment in you, your goodness is there, your kindness is there, your virtue is there. We're not discussing those. We're trying to analyse why we have problems, right? So this attachment is hungry for nice things. But of course, a person comes along and disturbs your peace, then aversion instantly arises in your mind. Instantaneously. And so what attachment is, oh, isn't that lovely, and you go towards it. What aversion is, oh, that's horrible, and you go away from it. So when that aversion, so in your mind, let's just use an example because you're talking, some maniac comes along, it disturbs your attachment. Attachment doesn't like that. Attachment only wants nice things. So then aversion instantly arises. And so depending on your personality, that would arise fear or worry or yourself angry, you go punch him in the nose. So that aversion, in the way it's manifesting in you, is to move away, and it brings fear. It brings fear. So it's still more subtle than that, but this is the basic thing, and we're going between this attachment and aversion like 1,000 times a day. So in other words, the default assumption is I must get what I want every second, which is attachment. Just assumption. And then the second it doesn't get what it wants, aversion arises. You can't cope with that. You go away from it, which is, and really, what triggers fear? It's that. Subtle, but it's all the time. You drop something, you get annoyed. Annoy, irritate, frustrated, upset, they're all polite words for this aversion. And we're doing it all the time. You drop something, you get annoyed. Because attachment doesn't want it. Attachment wants everything to be perfect. Attachment wants nice sound, nice smell, nice taste, nice feelings. And because this attachment is a junkie that is craving something, which is nice, pleasant feelings, the second it doesn't get it has a panic attack. And that means even the slightest thing can happen. The car jumping on you, the person doing something, the noise too loud, a person saying the wrong word to you, dropping something going wrong, the red light coming. Aversion arises. Now it's really strong. Someone comes and smashes you in the face, strong aversion will arise. Depending on your mind, you'll get depressed and totally fearful, or you'll punch. So this is really subtle, and this is happening for all of us. But the way our aversion manifests, in my case, I'll go and punch the guy in the nose. Another person might become more fearful, and will withdraw. But aversion is the point. But it's very subtle. Can you hear this though?
Yeah.
So attachment is this primordial neediness to get the nice things all the time. So what is our saving grace are our good qualities. So if you have any compassion, afterwards you'd notice your response and then you'd think of the person and you'd have compassion and realise they're suffering, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And that's because you can access your compassion. And that stuff's our saving grace. If we only had attachment and aversion and jealousy and anger, we'd be the maniacs. We'd be going around killing and lying and stealing and raping, you know. So luckily we can access our virtues. They're the ones that can have empathy, that cause us to understand things, our intelligence, our kindness, our compassion, our empathy. They're amazing. They're our saving grace. But this is the other stuff. This is the stuff. And often our trouble is too, our compassion and our goodness is polluted by our attachment. So let's say you've got an alcoholic brother and you love him. Love is a virtue. Love is under the positive heading. It's a wish that he be happy. You have compassion for him. You really do. You do love him. But because you've got strong attachment, and join the club here, we're all the same, your attachment doesn't like to see his alcoholism. It upsets you. It makes you worried, distressed, anxious, annoyed. You talk about it to other people. And the attachment can't stand it because it arises your aversion. So then that pollutes your compassion and you sort of stick your nose in where it doesn't belong because you want him to change, but your attachment can't stand it. So that affects your compassion. So then you boss him around or you demand he tries to change and you get upset with him because he doesn't change and you talk about him behind his back. That's not because of compassion. That's because of attachment. Can you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
It's very subtle and it's very natural.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to see the distinction between, let's say in this case, whether it's attachment or whether it's compassion. Like a mother for her child. There's masses of attachment, but she can't tell the difference between that and genuine love. That's why we're suckers when we've got too much attachment. Do you understand what I mean? And this is the stuff that until we start looking deeply inside and hearing all this and beginning to distinguish the attachment from the love, it's quite difficult, you know.
But that to me almost seems like, you know how you're describing that it's 3 millisecond.
Yeah.
You can pick up that it's aversion or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
In a sense, I would believe that you'd feel you're going crazy because you are aware that.
Yeah, I know, but it's true. But when you know why you're being aware, so you can change it, then you don't go crazy because it's not set in stone. If you don't, you can learn that you can know there's botany, but until you learn it and know exactly how to distinguish a weed from a herb or flower, you don't just distinguish and then leave it there. The reason to distinguish between the herb and the flower and the weed is so you do something about it, and that's the point here. The reason isn't just to distinguish. Then you'd go mad, you would. But it's to now let's do the action, which is hear the attachment story and argue with it and counteract it. That's the job. Then you want to see the detail. But if it's merely seeing the detail and not know how to change it, then you would go nuts. I totally agree. But the reason is to be your own therapist, so you can hear it and catch it. So you feel the fear, then you go, you analyse. What's your name?
Clara.
Clara. Then you talk to yourself. Oh, come on, relax, Clara. Come on, it's only a maniac guy. He's not doing anything. When you talk to yourself, you'd calm yourself down like you would a kid.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. You're being your own therapist.
Yeah.
And then you're happy to see the detail. Do you see my point? It's a big difference. It's a really good point you made.
Thank you very much.
Okay. What else, people? Anything else? Or was it enough for tonight? Yes.
Just very quick.
Yes, darling.
Do I assume correctly that we work on our karma right through our life?
Yeah, you do. You've got to do a bit of gardening every day. Yes, because what's in your garden is what you've planted, and you can distinguish between the weeds and the flowers. And you've got to do weeding every day because we know that weeding is, gardens are very dynamic. If you just don't work on something every day, it'll get carried away. So yes, every single day you work on it. It's what your job is. It's this job we're discussing here, and the job of therefore adjusting what you do and say, so that you stop sowing rubbish seeds and you grow the good seeds.
Yes. It's
That's
not that I'm saying I must have been perfect in another
No,
life,
of course
therefore
not.
I won't.
No. I mean, at some point we will get to the point the Buddha says, and it's very advanced, where we can stop that job. That's advanced, though.
What about when you are aware of a problem
Yes.
and you know it's karma
Yes.
and you don't work on it?
Well then, darling, if you don't, it's like, again, that's why I love the example of a garden. Everything in your garden is from seeds, isn't it?
Yep.
Would you agree whatever's in your garden comes from seeds? And it's your garden. And you want the veggies and the flowers, don't you? Well, then it's the same. Good example. You know you can't leave it there. You can't because it's dynamic. It grows. It's very intense energy. It's just natural that things expand and grow. We know that. That's why I love the analogy of gardens. Because you know you can't escape. You can't avoid. You can't make it go away. You can't wish it didn't happen. You can't just hope someone else will do it. It's your garden, babe.
Thank you.
And like anything, it's hard work. You know, because we're not used to gardening. But once we do it, we don't want to do anything else. Because you know you can change it and make it the garden you want. Do you understand?
Thank you.
Good, darling. So we have to be brave too. You know. And sometimes, and this is an interesting point, hang on a sec, it's also sometimes, you know, because it's ripening and coming, it doesn't mean you can't pull it out and make it stop. You know, sometimes we have to leave something. Nothing wrong with that. If the relationship's not working anymore, you know, there's a very strong thing in our culture that we're supposed to be together forever. Let's say in a relationship. But Buddha says it's ridiculous. If the karma runs out, it runs out. So you've got to recognise it's over and say, bye-bye, I'm leaving, because there's no point in bashing my head against a brick wall. Nothing wrong with that. But doing it for the right reason. Same with a job, same with anything. We tend to get stuck, you know. We've got to know we can change our condition, change the situation. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong. We don't have to put up with it. That's sometimes very passive.
Yes, the difficulty in that, I guess, is
Yes.
knowing when.
Yes, that's exactly
you
right.
reach
Precisely.
the point.
That's exactly right. No, that's really true. And that's where I think, you know, they talk a lot in the Buddhist one about, especially the Tibetans, about setting your intention, deciding. And the best motivation to always have every second for this job we're trying to do is to sincerely want to do what's most beneficial. Dalai Lama always says, if you want, always aspire to do what's most beneficial. If you can, long term better than short term. And that just means you wake up in the morning, okay, difficult choices to make, I want to do what's most beneficial. And my feeling is we might know what's most beneficial sometimes, but if you decide every day, I want to make the right choice, it will become that. You will do the right thing. In other words, it won't be just because of attachment and ridiculous rubbish. It won't be out of anger or attachment. It'll be because it's best for you, and even though the other person mightn't think so, it's best for them as well. We've got to make it, and we can't make everyone happy. It's an impossibility. Because a person, you know, if I have a relationship with a person, it's up to, if they can't change their mind, my job is to try and make them happy. But in the end, they have to make themselves happy. And I can't make, it's not possible to make everything perfect. So we've got to have the courage to make tough choices sometimes, no matter what people think. And that's difficult because our deepest attachment of all is to what people think of us. The deepest of all. We're constantly terrified, I think, to do things that might upset other people. But it's really because we don't want them to criticise us. It's very deep. So we have to have courage. Do you understand?
Thank you.
What else, Peter? Yes.
My question is kind of sort of been answered, was how do we know what's karma and we should just accept, and how do we know what we should change?
Well, it's all karma in the sense that everything in your garden is due to fruit, so that's a given. So learning to, and that means we've got to learn to know what to continue with, and that takes time.
So there's no simple answer.
No, there isn't a simple answer here, but I think as we get more in touch with something and learn more botany, if you like, you'll really learn to understand what's right for the bigger picture. It really is common sense, but it comes not just from this theory, it comes from knowing your own mind well and knowing the conditions and knowing that, you know, it's like, and having this genuine wish to do what's best. And sometimes it might be best for you, because, you know, you can't stand that job anymore and you're not getting anywhere. And sometimes it might, and even though, I mean, it's not easy, but we've got to have the courage to want to do the right thing. And the right thing means, if it's the wisdom wing, so there's only two wings of the bird. The wisdom wing is, you'd say to yourself, my doing this help me lessen my neuroses, lessen my delusions, and develop my qualities? Then if the answer is yes, you do it. If even more profound is, will this truly be a benefit to others? Then if it truly is, then that'll also include you. So we've got to know which one. We've got to be brave. We've got to be reasonable, not martyrs, you know. And we're not perfect, we'll make mistakes. So we learn every day, isn't it? But have courage. Got to have courage, I tell you. You know. What else, people? Will that do you think? Oh yes, there's a hand. And there's a head there with a hand. Go, darling.
Just got two. One's I think quicker than the other one. So with the thing with karma with China or Tibet,
Yeah.
on more of a global scale, is
Yeah.
that because they would have all done some bad things as a geographic sort of,
Why
Yeah.
not?
like, because on a personal level I get it, but then when you get like a whole civilization.
But what's wrong with that? I mean, I know, good point. Civilizations are made up of individuals, aren't they?
Yeah.
So do you agree that we do things as groups?
Yeah.
So then we experience things as groups,
Yeah.
don't we?
Cool.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, here we are, we're a group here tonight. We probably won't ever meet in the same configuration in this life, will we? Probably won't come together. But it's not, I mean, I know it sounds, again, cosmic, but it has to be. I mean, here we are, we're not discussing guns, are we? We're not discussing fishing We're not discussing cake making. We're discussing Buddhism. I mean, you know, we might have been Buddhists in 42 lives ago. Maybe there's some group we've come together, and here's seemingly random coming together of a certain group of people. Or let's say the house suddenly falls down. That's group karma. So Australians are group karma. Men have got group karma. Asians, you know, groups of people. Black people in a certain country where you suffer, group karma. You know, you're born in a certain situation. Oh, Jews, Muslims. I mean, all the dramas going on now. The Jews, the Hitler business. You know, the Chinese, the communists. I mean, the Tibetans. They all accept completely. That's groups. We come together in groups, and we experience things as groups. So as we do things as groups as well. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
You had two questions, you said.
Yeah, so the second one is kind of relating to that
Yeah.
a little bit. Is that what's the time frame on karma? I don't know if there is
Millions
one.
of years, they say.
No, like, but then how do you know when? Like, is there like a timer that goes bing that's ripening?
Yeah, I mean,
and bing that's like, when,
well, there is. Again, if it's botany, botany is a natural law, right?
Yeah.
So do you agree the more you learn it, the more you can know these answers, isn't it? Well, the same with karma. If this is a natural law that Buddha's observed, not made up, then it's all there for us to learn. But it's clearly, obviously, quite intricate.
But is there like murder might be like a level 10, and that takes like 5 years. Where like if you just punch someone, it might be like a level.
Oh, of
3,
course, yeah, level. Of
and then
course.
that takes like 1 year. Or
No,
something.
no, of course there are. Okay, there are various factors involved when we create karma, as they say, you know. So the key factor that determines the strength of the karma we create is what is the role our mind plays in it. In fact, you know, you could argue. Let's say you've got we did this in a teacher centre. We had this conversation, you know. If you say a typical example of a complete action of killing, which would, if you leave that seed in your mind, would ripen in the future as suffering rebirths, there'd have to be 4 factors in place. There has to be the living mouse, first one, object. Second is your mind, the role your mind plays. This is the main one. If that's missing, okay, there's 3 parts there. The first part is, we've discussed this, is recognition. That is the mouse I will kill. The second one is the bare bones intention. I will kill that mouse. The third is, and this is the key one, is we'd say the reason why you're going to do it, the motivation. The stronger that is. So let's say you're sadistic. Let's say you're really sadistic, you love to see people suffer, and you kill the mouse really slowly and delight and rejoice. The stronger the way you do it, the more your mind's involved in it, the more you want to harm, the deeper and the more heavy the karma. It's sort of logical. The more your mind is involved, the more heavy your delusion, and equally the more strong your virtue, the more powerful the karma. So your mind is what creates karma. You could even, like the third step is that you do the action, the fourth is the mouse dies. So we all, you know, you could have the number 2 missing totally. There could be the mouse there. You could put your foot on the ground and the mouse dies. But there is no karma because minds create karma.
To me, that denotes more of the intensity of the whiplash, not the time frame of when you get the whiplash.
No, that's just the intensity of the seed that you plant,
Yeah.
and then how many seeds, how many fruits it will bring, and when they'll ripen.
But when the ripen thing is more the question.
Well, I know. Well, that's the intensity of the fruit, of the strength of the seed. And I mean, obviously,
So
the one that ripens in your garden today is the seed that you planted the earliest, isn't it? If you put 10 apple seeds in the ground, one every 3 years, obviously the one that will ripen first is the one that you planted first.
So they're sequential then.
Well, of course it's sequential. Of course it is.
Well, I just thought they might be quicker, like some might be quicker if it's
Yeah,
more
some would be
dense
if they're more heavy.
or slower.
They even say, generally speaking, they say that any karmas, most actions we do in this life won't ripen in this life. So, but if you kill a very heavy one like kill your mum, that could ripen. That's a very extra heavy action. There are some that are more powerful in themselves. Yes, of course, all these play a role. Yes.
So how does a natural time frame sort out which ones?
Well, how does botany work? All the laws of nature, darling. It's natural law, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is natural law of minds, and this is just the way it all works. All the conditions come together: the water, the air, the earth, the sun. Just they all do their job, don't they? It's dependent arising, isn't it? Well, this is dependent arising too. The way the minds are, the conditions, the factors. It's just a natural law. No one's running it, and we have to learn it so we can work with it. That's the idea. Do you see my point? Luckily, we can purify karma. One of the practices we do every day that Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do every day. Given that every millisecond of what we think and do and say leaves seeds, And given that we're not highly realised spiritual practitioners yet, then we're sowing a bunch of rubbish seeds, aren't we? So there's 2 levels of practice. The most urgent level, very first, grade 1 junior school entry level practice, is back off and stop sowing as many bad seeds as you can. The next one is start pulling out the seeds you've already planted before they grow. That's called purification. That's why the first level of practice is back off and don't kill, don't lie, don't steal. Be a nice person, please. At least don't sow too many new negative seeds. And then purify the ones you've already planted. And then there can be some space to start growing the flowers, to practice virtue and be good and kind and loving, you know. It's kind of practical. I think it's enough food for thought. Don't you think? It's 9:30 for God's sake. Look, 9:36, oh my God, 35. So we finish with a little prayer again, 2 little prayers, like bookends. I think of them as bookends. Here we've been just discussing a few Buddhist ideas about the way the world is. We can do what we like with this. Maybe we can completely dismiss it. That's perfectly fine. Buddha is not the boss. But if there's something useful, even 1% of what we've heard might be useful, then amazing. We take it on board. It's up to us, completely. So if there's anything useful, how marvellous. May we use. So the point is that the Buddha would say, this hour and 2.5 hours we've been here together, as many moments as there have been, as many thoughts we've had, which means that's as many seeds we've planted, and none of this will go astray. So we think, how marvellous, 2 hours of gardening, how fantastic. So maybe we think nourish these seeds from this moment forward. So they do manifest in the development of our own marvellous potential for clarity and kindness and less neurosis and all that, for our sake and the sake of others, because we live in this world together. Kewajinyu dudar lama sangye drugyurne drowachikyang malupa deisala gopasho jangchub semchog rinpoche make panam kegyuchi ke panyam pa me payang gongne gongdu bhavasho. Okay, I have 3 advertisements. One is, there's some cards out there. Christina in Sydney was going to do a trek up to Laudo, which is Lamazopa's cave sort of thing, up in the Solakumbu area, in Nepal. And then Sonny, I got the job to lead it. So we're going to do a 15-day, not all trekking, but starting in Kopan, then trekking and a few days of retreat and coming down again. And it'll raise money for there. That's in April. And then there's a usually one we do every year, a pilgrimage to all the holy places of Buddha in India and Nepal, which is amazing. 3 weeks, that's this November. Every year we do that. That raises money for the prison project. And the third one is a movie out there called Chasing Buddha that my nephew made years ago that isn't run, my Bodhicitta Trust put that together. That raises money for that, which sort of does good jobs, So there's my advertisements. Okay, I'm going to sit here and relax, okay?
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Oh, good.
All
Pleasure.
of us who managed to get together again, let's do it again.
Meet
soon.
again in this life, okay?
And it's just amazing to be able to sit here in this place in my home. And just hear it so clearly and so wonderfully. So
I said he should start a Buddhist centre. It's ridiculous.
Yes,
Why doesn't he start a group?
Yes, please.
So maybe this idea will take root with his mother. That's his mother.
Yes.
She lives next door. They're Italian. So they should do a mother-son little study group. Just start one and get a name and start doing classes. So I'll come one time and we'll do a weekend retreat next time I come
That'd be
down.
wonderful, and that's what we would love.
I'll do it.
Please come
2018.
back. 2018. Thank you.
Right.
And,
If we're still alive.
yes, please
We'll do
live
a
long.
weekend retreat.
Yes.
Yes.
Between the 2 houses.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
We'll
It's
get
a
Dad
date.
to come over.
It's a date. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, darling. Thank you very much.
Thank you
It's a
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you,
Wonderful,
Jason. Very good.
wonderful.
Pleasure. Okay, you people. How are you? Terrific. Good. Happy to see you.